Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna continue the story. What if Deku became the hired assassin? Part 2. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Alright. Our next pair will be Bakugo and Midoriya, and they will be facing All Might. All Might looked at the principal in disbelief and said, "Me? Yes. Young Midoriya is a unique individual who can defeat even the most formidable quirked fighter," Nezu started. "And Katsuki Bakugo, his former bully and tormentor who has learned humility as a result of terrible circumstances, and young Midoriya have a tentative peace and are even willing to work together. But can they set aside their beliefs to fight an enemy they have no chance of defeating? When Bakugo has only a quirky hero as a backup, will his prejudices reappear? Will Midoriya be able to identify a situation where a hero without a quirk has a better chance of fleeing for assistance rather than continuing to fight until they are seriously hurt or killed? Midoriya has shown multiple times that he doesn't fear severe injury or death." Aizawa continued, "We've seen it time and time again from his battle with the Nomu, to the Hosu incident. But things changed at Hosu." Midnight pointed out, instead of forcing himself to help Deadshot with the hero killer, he sent Endeavor in his stead. "I believe that has to do with his ward, Eri." Nezu laughed, as well as the influence of his friends. "Will that, however, be sufficient for him to know when to run in a training situation?" Powerloader inquired. "If there's one thing the little listener prides himself on, it's treating training like the real thing." The microphone said. "Still begs to question if the two can work together. Well, now's as good a time as any to find out. I can't be too easy on them, but I don't want to hurt them." All Might sighed as he entered the battle center. Taking on the role of the villain, he grunted and threw 70% of his strength into a Detroit smash, leveling a huge portion of the city in front of him. He then started to walk towards them while laughing loudly and saying, "WHO cares if I destroy this city? What will you little heroes do?" All Might. With his fist cocked back, Bakugo roared as he blasted his way straight for the #1 hero. All Might easily grabbed his arm and flipped him, slamming him into the ground before quickly moving away as a barrage of bullets rained down on him. Before he could detect their source, Bakugo shot back up, slamming an explosive fist into All Might's jaw and then hitting him multiple times in the chest. Texas smash. Bakugo gasped as he was launched down the street, and the #1 hero, taken aback when Bakugo started pelting him with low-level explosions, lunged forward and seized his face. It's amazing how most people will grab onto anything that grabs their face. With that, All Might slammed Bakugo into the ground, staggering as a large caliber round exploded against his back. "Is that all you got? Midoriya, young? Don't ignore me, please." Bakugo growled as he was suddenly jumping back up, pulling the pins on one of his gauntlets. Howitzer impact. All Might coughed as he forced himself to stand up after the explosion sent him flying and slamming into a red brick building. "You're a lot stronger than I thought you were, young Bakugo." All Might wheezed out, trying to see through the building's dust, his eyes widening when he saw the walls lined with multiple bundles of C4, the closest of which had a smiley face painted on it. As the C4 went off, All Might laughed and leveled the building, saying, "Young Midoriya. You believe he was swayed?" As Izuku ran out of a nearby building, slinging his rifle and turning his helmet to thermal, Bakugo asked. Izuku grimly recollected the time before the test began and said, "I can't see him, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything good. We're fucked." "Shut up, fucking foobar. Will you please close it now? Never knew you for one to admit defeat," Bakugo commanded angrily, glaring at the tactical teenager next to him as he loaded his guns with live rounds. "I'm not," Izuku sighed, "but you know as well as I do that we can't match up to All Might in terms of raw strength. He'll be toying with us the entire time." "I know," Bakugo muttered, "but what's the strategy?" "What?" Izuku inquired, startled. "What the hell is the plan? You always have some sort of plan or strategy, so what the fucking plan is?" Bakugo yelled. Izuku looked at him for a few seconds before shaking his head, taking out a small notebook, and starting to draw a map of their battle center. He said, "Like I said, we'll be outmatched fighting All Might. We simply don't have the strength or firepower to do any kind of damage save for maybe a few bruises. But if we play smart, we can take him using hit-and-run tactics, wear him down." He started drawing X's on the map, saying, "We put explosives here, here, and here. Lure him in and blow him. Second explosion should give us a smokescreen as well, deal some damage with the initial concussive blow." He then turned to Bakugo, saying, "If he gets wise to it too early, then the plan's kaput, but if we play it smart, we may be able to stall him long enough for both of us to get to the gate. And if we don't, When the time comes, we'll burn that bridge. As Izuku started to head for the closest alleyway, he said, 15 seconds, adding, 4 buildings down, cafe, that's our next target. All Might, the hero playing villain, was still grinning as he darted out of the smoke, unharmed, and snarled, make sure you're clear. Bakugo snarled as he leapt back to avoid his punch. He grabbed Bakugo's leg and slammed him into the ground, bouncing him into one of the buildings. Did you really think that would work? All Might boasted as he charged after Bakugo, barely even a sting. Stop talking. Bakugo exploded another big explosion in All Might's face and snapped. Izuku inhaled deeply after completing the final flight of stairs in a nearby high-rise. He slid into position by a broken window as he saw All Might, saying, explosive-tipped rounds don't fail me now. He followed the carnage of Bakugo and All Might's fight, which was, if you can call it that, a one-sided ass-beating. As All Might slammed Bakugo into the ground again, he muttered, come on Bakugo, get him to stand still. He stood over him and appeared to say to monologue, smile asshole. He growled as he inhaled and squeezed the trigger, sending the bullet through the air and directly into All Might's chest. The round exploded on All Might's hand as he turned to face Izuku and threw Bakugo away, only to have him swatted out of the sky. Oh shit! All Might exploded into the floor, and Izuku rolled to the side. You believed you could defeat me using the same tactic as before, didn't you, Midoriya? All Might laughed as Izuku raised his wrist-mounted gun and unleashed automatic fire on All Might as he jumped out the window, his other wrist snapping up to fire a grappling hook into another building, swinging down towards safety. Bakugo, he's made me. Reach the gate, proceed to. Not so quick. All Might gave the order as he appeared next to Izuku out of nowhere and punched him, sending him flying into the cafe with All Might right behind him. As the wounded student pulled himself away from the hero, All Might praised him, saying, "You've failed, Midoriya. Had I been any other enemy, you would already be clasping the handcuffs on me now, but I'm not. Your plan was well thought out, young Midoriya." With his right ankle twisted at an awkward angle, Izuku gritted his teeth and asked, "Have I?" He glared at All Might and used the bar as a hold to force himself to stand up. "You stumbled into a bit of a pickle here, All Might." "And how's that?" he inquired in a humorous tone. "Boom bitch." Izuku growled as he lifted the detonator and said, "You're standing in a bomb." Izuku was about to press the button when All Might sprang forward for him, but he was too slow. "Bakugo, if you can hear me, get to the gate, I'll do what I can to keep him occupied, just go." He practically yelled into his radio as he turned his infrared back on, raising his MP5 and firing at All Might's lumbering form as he came teetering out of the cafe. The explosion sent Izuku flying out of the cafe, tumbling across the rubble-strewn ground as he forced himself to his feet, limping down the street as the smoke grenades he had paired with the explosives did their job, shrouding the area in a dense fog. "Well, that didn't last long," he said aloud as his goggles returned to normal after he saw All Might clap, clearing the smoke and causing Izuku to slump. With a few scratches and bruises on his arms and chest, along with a torn uniform that exposed his right arm and pectoral, All Might coughed and said, "You fought hard, young Midoriya, worthy of being called a hero. Now, admit defeat. You didn't think a bit of smoke would have kept me out of the game, did you?" "Maybe I should," Izuku muttered, holding his head up high, as he dropped his MP5. "Put up a good fight, gave you some scratches worth talking about. Anyone else would say that's a job well done and take the lower grade. But this isn't about grades, this is about my pride, and my pride isn't gonna let me do anything less than my absolute best. Besides, there comes a point in every man's life where he has to pull himself up by his bootstraps, look his opponent dead in his eye and say come fucking on." Izuku roared as he charged All Might, prosthetic arm vibrating with raw energy as All Might met the blow with his own. Their fists connected and blew out the windows in every building on the street. Izuku let out a roar of pain as his prosthetic jarred his shoulder. He jumped back and tried to pull his dual sidearms, only for his prosthetic to fail and hang uselessly by his side. "Son of a bitch." He swore as he raised his single Beretta and emptied the mag at All Might as the man lunged for him. He cocked his fist back, bullets bouncing harmlessly off his body. "Time to say goodnight," exclaimed All Might. Boom. "Good night, asshole." Bakugo growled as he bounded onto the scene, yanking the gauntlet's pin and letting loose its full force in All Might's stomach, sending the faux villain hurtling through a skyscraper and into the air. Izuku dropped to his knee and mumbled, "You were supposed to go to the gate." Bakugo responded, "You think I'd let you have all the fun?" as he placed an arm beneath Izuku's and helped him up, the two of them limping off toward the gate. "Fuck off." "Is that what you call it?" he asked, trying not to trip as he examined his ally. His uniform was marred by tears and gashes, he was holding his right arm awkwardly, and one of his gauntlets was missing. Likely broken by one of All Might's blows. He broke your arm, didn't he? As they staggered through the gate, Izuku fell forward and Bakugo crumpled where he stood, looking up at the sky. Did you really stand off against All Might, you idiot? Bakugo snapped, nothing but a bruise. What, you wanted me to run like a little bitch? Izuku asked, laughing. You wanted me to. That's because you are a little bitch. Bakugo's eyes grew wide, and he let out a weary laugh. Before long, both of them were laughing, too exhausted to get up and go to the observation station. They didn't stand and proceed towards the infirmary until All Might arrived to pick them up. They stumbled together along the trail, arms over each other's shoulders. With Momo at his side, fussing over him anxiously, Izuku grunted as he hobbled out of the infirmary without his prosthetic and on one crutch. As she finished healing Bakugo, the recovery girl called to him, your ankle should be fine by tomorrow. Just keep your weight off of it. Hatsume is also aware of your arm, and she should have it fixed by tomorrow afternoon. Izuku limped through the halls and called back, got ya, saying, thanks for the help, ya Momo. You're welcome. Do you want to go to the ramen stand? She asked with a warm smile. Mom's not expecting me for a bit, so sure, young Midoriya. All Might slid to a halt in front of them, and Izuku and Yaomomo both leapt. Izuku said, bewildered, All Might. What are you doing here? The man bellowed, I was hoping to talk with you privately, it may take a bit. Izuku started, well, me and Yaomomo. Go ahead, Izuku. Momo encouraged him to do so, it's not every day the #1 hero wants to talk with you. Izuku said, fine. Rain, check on that ramen? With a sigh and a nod. She kissed his cheek and walked away, saying, of course. Izuku blushed indignantly as she hurried off. Blushing as well from her spontaneous kiss. You cunning dog, Midoriya, now, follow me to my office. We have a lot to talk about, All Might chuckled. Izuku followed All Might into his office and down the hallways, saying, after you. So, what's this about? It's about the future. All Might murmured, young Midoriya, I have decided that you will be my successor. Blinking, Izuku said, What? He inquired. I want you to become my successor. All Might replied, I don't have long to be the symbol of peace, and I want the world to know that there will be a symbol when I am gone. Izuku sighed and ran his hand through his hair, saying, come on All Might, you're still in your prime, how could you? He stopped as steam filled the office, his eyes widening as the smoke cleared and a familiar figure appeared. Mr. Yagi? He questioned in disbelief. Toshinori sat down in his chair and coughed, the one and only. The injury that ended your career, Izuku muttered, glancing at Toshinori, as he slowly sat down on the couch nearby. It didn't end your career. But I'm going to assume that it's the reason why you can't continue being the symbol of peace. As he lifted his shirt to reveal the wound to Izuku again, Toshinori sighed and said, I came to UA in the hopes of finding a successor, because you see, my quirk was passed on to me. Like you, I was born quirkless with the dream of being a hero. 5 years ago, he got into a fight with a villain who put this hole into my chest, losing my stomach and half of my lung as a result. He looked up at Izuku, looking him in the eye. When my master told me that I would eventually have to pass on my quirk, Izuku Midoriya was the person I chose. But, there's better options than me. Izuku replied softly, I'm just a gun-toting quirkless kid. The skeletal man stood and walked over to Izuku, placing a hand on his shoulder. I know this is a lot of information to process, so why don't you take the next few days to yourself? Toshinori said candidly, you want to be a hero to help people, not for the glamour or fame, but to better the world around you. A gun-toting quirkless kid with more heart than the next 3 classes combined. All Might raised an eyebrow in surprise when Izuku said, I already know my answer and I'm gonna have to refuse. May I ask why? He whispered softly. I see, a few reasons. Izuku sighed as he raised his prosthetic. My arm for one, it was completely trashed after taking just 1 punch from you. I don't think it would hold together well if I inherited your quirk. I also don't think becoming the symbol of peace is for me. I'm a simple guy who just wants to help out, not some messiah that everyone will look up to. Besides, I have a kid to watch, I don't want to subject her to that kind of scrutiny. Also, how would we explain how I suddenly received a quirk? Toshinori gave a soft nod, I understand. Just know that I truly think you are the best candidate to receive one for all, my quirk. Izuku laughed and said, you want my advice, I think Kirishima is leagues better than I am. He then got back up and hobbled to the door but said, nah, I don't think I am. Young Kirishima. He definitely has the spirit. Toshinori murmured, well, thank you for hearing me out, young Midoriya, and please, keep this a secret. Izuku said, of course, see ya later, and hobbled off. He'll be a great hero, all for one or not, and I hope he goes farther than I ever did, Toshinori said as she watched him go. Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall 2 days later. Izuku yawned as he joyfully followed Momo and Eri, happy to just observe Momo's lust for adorable clothes for his ward while Eri followed with her typical quiet zeal. Oh, you'd look adorable in this, Momo gushed as she pulled a small blue sundress off the rack, simply darling. I would? Surprised, Eri asked. You would be the cutest blue unicorn this side of Shizuoka, Izuku said, ruffling her hair a little and making her laugh. Want to give it a try? Momo inquired softly. Out here, I'll be waiting. Izuku sat down in a nearby chair and called out to them. Hey Midoriya, unsurprised. Izuku looked up to see Kirishima standing awkwardly at the store's entrance. Thought you went to go find weights with Bakugo and Shiro. Izuku said in a conversational tone as the redhead approached and took a seat next to him. I wanted to talk to you real quick, he murmured, about All Might. Looking at the other patrons mingling, Izuku remarked, this isn't the best place to be talking about secret matters. Why don't you join me at the shooting range this evening? I don't know about you, but it really clears my mind to dump some brass. With a smile, Kirishima said, never really shot a gun before, but sounds good. The door opened. Well, take a peek at this tiny princess. Princesses shouldn't walk on the floor, Izuku exclaimed, causing Kirishima to look at him in disbelief as this pragmatic killer abruptly transformed into a loving father and picked up a laughing Eri. Your servants are missing. A princess is not me, shyly, Eri giggled. You're not? I was positive you were. You look just as good as one. That's correct, Kirishima. That's right. Kirishima agreed right away, grinning amusingly at Momo, the prettiest in the land. Momo said affectionately, let's go pay for it. I think we'll take the dress then. Later that night, as the final round exited the chamber, Kirishima watched Izuku empty the magazine on an M16. The boy groaned in satisfaction, saying, nothing like a mag dump. He sat down in the chair next to Kirishima and said, well, Eri's bothering the old man and Momo's on the phone with her mom. Why don't we get to that discussion you wanted? What made you turn it down? Like I told All Might, I have Eri. I can't dedicate my life to being the symbol of peace, nor do I want to. I'm just a simple gunslinger, Kirishima blurted out, causing Izuku to blink in semi-confusion before slowly nodding. He held up his recently repaired prosthetic, saying, this thing wouldn't hold up to his full power either. He looked at Kirishima, the redhead was lying, and said, you should feel honored, All Might chose you. Only because you recommended me, Kirishima murmured, and I don't even know why you did. You could have chosen Bakugo, or Todoroki. Bakugo is too prideful, Izuku bluntly stated. He's here to fight bad guys, doesn't really put an emphasis on reassuring the people. Same with Todoroki, you actually want to help. Izuku raised an eyebrow at Kirishima's scathing remark, but I'm a coward. Kirishima sighed and started to tell a story. Back in middle school I wanted nothing more than to be a hero. I was obsessed with Crimson Riot and tried to live my life being the best man I could be. But I could never hold up in a fight. My quirk was so weak that I could barely harden my fists. No one took me seriously, even my own friends. Then that day, he shook his head and let it hang. I saw a gigantic villain threatening a couple of my classmates, and no one was moving to help. I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear. I didn't move until after Mina got rid of him by pointing him in the direction of a police station instead of the hero agency he was looking for. Sounds like something that would stop you from being a hero. So why are you at UA? Izuku said as he slowly leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees after the two boys had been silent for a while. I vowed to live my life exactly like that after discovering an old holodisc containing one of Crimson Riot's interviews. He talked about how he couldn't save someone and how he charged into situations out of fear rather than fear. Izuku patted his shoulder and grinned, saying, and that is why I think you'll be a great successor. You aren't in this for the looks or fame, you're in to be exactly who we need as the symbol of peace, Izuku said. As he turned his head away, Kirishima felt tears well up in his eyes. You really think so? As Izuku stood up and took his hand off the other boy's shoulder, he said, I know so. Now enough crying, he said. I brought the manliest gun in my arsenal for you to shoot, and I'll be damned if we end up having a chick flick moment instead of belting it out. The most powerful weapon? Kirishima wiped away his tears and asked. Oh yeah, Izuku said, lifting a big bag and unzipping it. Kirishima gasped as she peered inside. As that, it is. How were they obtained? He hefted the gun out of the bag and said, Old Mon's got a lot of contacts. This is the only gun I didn't give up when I brought all my weapons to Ua. The M134 minigun, he said, flipping a switch and pulling the trigger, turning the barrels. 10 barrels, chambered in 7.62 by 51mm NATO. This bitch can turn a car into a bonfire in less than a minute. He placed the gun on the table and reached under it to slide out a large steel container, saying, This would go on your back if you were carrying it. Holds up to 3,000 rounds of ammo for this little darling. He connected the feeder to the gun and fed rounds into it, asking, Wanna know what pure ecstasy feels like? You know it. For the day, Momo was prepared. Still, she double-checked her bags to make sure everything was in its proper place. As Uraraka approached the heiress with her own bag on her back and Mina, who was half asleep, trudged along beside her, she exclaimed, Hey ya Momo. You're here early. I wanted to ensure I would be on time. Momo responded with kindness, I am vice president after all. With a roller suitcase clattering behind her, Tsuyu approached and asked, which begs the question. Where's Izuku? He said he would be a little late, Momo replied, because he's having trouble finding some of Eri's things. Kaminari winced at the loud noise as Kirishima asked excitedly, Is she coming along? Kaminari moaned, My head is pounding, and said, Keep it down. With her jacks up in a menacing position, Juru said sharply, Then maybe you shouldn't be trying to spy on the girls when they're having a pool day. With a nervous laugh, Kaminari tried to divert attention from himself by asking, right, so who's coming along? Eri, Midoriya's adopted daughter, Kirishima said, Cutest little girl you'll ever meet. He's right, Momo said with a laugh, he knows she has Midoriya tethered to her little finger. What is causing her to appear? Not to come across as impolite, but we'll be training a lot, and I doubt anyone could look after her, Tsuyu inquired. Sick bastards hurt her, and we don't want them getting her back. So Midoriya and a few others are doing what they can to protect her, Kirishima said, his voice losing its excitement as he glared off into the distance. And she'll be the safest with me, at a summer camp with pro heroes nearby. Midori bro. As everyone turned to face the resident gunslinger, who was wearing a basic white muscle shirt and blue jeans, with his long hair pulled back in a loose ponytail and 2 bags in his prosthetic hand, Kirishima said hello. Eri, who was currently hiding behind his leg, was wearing blue jeans and a light blue t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, and she was looking around his leg with curiosity, observing the few faces there. She had met some of them the day before, but she had also never met others like Kaminari and Juru. Izuku said, Go on and say hi Eri, and nudged her forward. Eri nervously said, Hi. I'm Eri. The hard rocker gave Kaminari a stern nudge after she whispered to Juru, She's so tiny. Hello Eri, Juru said politely while bending slightly. My name is Kyoka Juru, and I like your hair. Shyly, she said, Thank you, it's like you Momo's. The girls all swooned over the cute little girl, and Mina smiled sultrily at Momo while the heiress flushed. Hello, Izuku. Why is there a half pint here? Bakugo walked over with a few of his classmates and asked sternly. Kitty-san. Eri exclaimed joyfully as the boy frowned at the moniker and turned to run up to Bakugo, grinning broadly. Kitty-san. Uraraka questioned with a laugh. Bakugo grunted and picked up the young girl with one arm, glaring at Izuku and everyone else who was laughing. The runt can't say my full name, he said, thought she was gonna stay home. Izuku put their bags down and crossed his arms, saying, Rin and Mom think she'd benefit from having a week or 2 out at the summer camp, and honestly, I feel better knowing she'll be close by. Everyone laughed when Sato said softly, Oh my god he's such a dad. I'll ground you if you don't watch it. Izuku gave the Sugar Rush hero a friendly prod. It's okay if it's not 1A. Eri buried her face in Bakugo's shoulder, terrified by Monoma's yelling, Shut it idiot, you're scaring the kid. Bakugo snarled. Is it so irresponsible of one of the incredibly talented 1A students to have a snot-nosed brat? As he approached them, Monoma scoffed and said, Oh how the mighty. He squeaked in fear as Izuku almost teleported in front of him, exuding a lethal aura while he drew the slide back on a Glock. He growled, That's my daughter you're talking about. As Bakugo approached from behind Monoma, Kirishima declared, And my niece. He added his own lethal aura to Izuku's, enhancing the already formidable threat. Even with a child in his arms. Who are you referring to as a brat? Bakugo growled. The quintessential 1AB brutes. It's not very heroic to threaten people, Monoma stammered. Shortly after pushing past the three boys and grabbing Monoma by the scruff and dragging him away, Kendo said, "Neither is being a bully, Monoma. Sorry, Midoriya, I'll keep him reined in." When Izuku checked on Eri, she immediately moved into his arms and buried her face in the crook of his neck. "See that you do," he grunted, adding, "I don't need him continually scaring my daughter." She gave Monoma a stern look that made him cower and said, "He'll behave or else." "That was amazing," Todoroki muttered. "He said one thing about Eri and almost got killed by three of our strongest guys," Kaminari murmured. Ojiro sighed, "She's the most dangerous person on this trip." As he approached, the buses came in a few seconds behind him, and Aizawa called, "Everyone on the bus." As everyone else passed, Aizawa began, "Midoriya, your stuff is stowed away under the bus," he said softly, "and you'll have to leave Eri with me any time you're training." He placed a hand on his shoulder. Eri transferred arms once more and curled up in Momo's lap after Izuku said, "Understood." Eri then fully boarded the bus and sat down beside Momo. "Are you worn out, my love?" When the young girl nodded in agreement, Momo said softly, "Go ahead and take a nap. We'll be there before you know it." "Okay, Mama." Eri closed her eyes and yawned. As several of the nearby girls silently cooed at the cute display, Momo's eyes began to water. "Izuku, she called me Mama," she whispered. With a gentle, "Welcome to the family," Izuku put his arm around Momo, causing her to flush. "Don't they look adorable?" Mina exclaimed to Hagakure, "Why are we unable to find a man like that?" "Yeah, Kirishima," Kaminari began, smiling mischievously at the boy with the spiked hair. "Why can't she find a guy like that?" Kirishima spluttered, turning to Bakugo for support. Well. Gazing out the window, Bakugo snarled, "Leave me out of this shitty hair." When Bakugo turned to face her and growled low in his throat, Uraraka pointedly turned away and remarked, "Not like Bakugo would have been able to help." Izuku rolled his eyes and remarked, "Both of you cool it back there." Bakugo sneered, "TCH, whatever you say, Dad," causing the bus to burst into startled laughter. He moaned, "Griat, everyone's doing that now." Momo laughed. Even though everyone kept their voices down for the sake of the napping Eri, the atmosphere on the bus was generally cheerful, with everyone talking, laughing, and enjoying themselves. They soon reached a small outcropping on a mountainside, and Mineta bounded out of the bus as it slowly came to a stop. "Where is the restroom located?" As everyone left, he danced from side to side while crying. Kaminari looked over the cliff and whistled, "Nice view. Doesn't look like there's any bathroom out here, buddy." "Why are we coming to this stop?" Izuku questioned Aizawa as everyone dispersed to extend their legs. Aizawa stated plainly, "Get your gear. Gauntlets and guns only." Izuku nodded and turned to face Eri before gathering his belongings. "Hey princess," he said gently as the young girl wiped the sleep from her eyes, "we're going to begin our training, so you must stay with Mr. Aizawa no matter what." She muttered, "Okay," as she glanced at Aizawa, a little uneasy. Izuku kissed her forehead and said, "It'll be okay, just remember, I'll always come back." He then walked back to the bus, opened the storage area, found his black duffel, and discreetly put on both gauntlets and strapped his gun belt around his waist. He checked both handguns and nodded as he holstered them before taking out his M4 and pair of goggles, putting them on before putting on a ball cap. He then returned to the group as they were talking to the students, arriving just in time to hear Aizawa. "Your training starts now." Kaminari began to say, "Maybe we should get back on the bus," but as soon as the ground gave way beneath them, the electric user grabbed onto Izuku, hoping he would keep them both upright, but instead he pulled Izuku out into the open. "Papa!" Eri screamed and hurried to the brink, but Aizawa intervened. "Don't worry," Aizawa replied to her, "he's tough, and this is training, we would never put them in actual danger." Eri kept peering over the edge with concern. "You alive, Kaminari?" Izuku grunted as he hit the ground. He sat up with a groan. The sparky teenager, lying on his stomach on top of a boulder, sighed, "Yeah. That didn't work out like I planned." "No shit," Izuku complained as he got to his feet and turned to face the cliff. "I'm fine, Eri, we'll see you at the lodge," he called. "Okay. We have to head west from where we are right now, so I want Kirishima and Bakugo at the front with Todoroki. Iida, you'll scout ahead with Shoji, see what we can see. Tsuyu, Uraraka, Ojiro, and Hagakure, you guys tag along in case they need protection. Give us as many early warnings as you can. Sato, I want you at the back with Tokiyami, Mineta, Jiru, Siro, and Mina. Make anything attacking us from the back regret it." He turned to face his classmates and nodded as he saw Momo distributing headsets. You're in the center with Kaminari and me, Yao Momo. We're supporting our heavy hitters. Is everyone on the same page? Let's strike. Bakugo's hands crackled, and Kirishima whooped, bringing his hardened fists together. Midoriya, we won't let you down. With his team following him, Iida declared as he launched into the forest. Sato consumed 2 packets of sugar while everyone tensed at the sound of falling trees. Izuku repeatedly pressed a button on his goggles, switching between the various optics that were available. What do you have, scout team? I'm not getting any kind of visual on whatever it is. Not yet. Through the communications, Iida's voice said, whatever it is, it's enormous. People, let's get moving. Remain together. Get in touch. As they started to enter the forest, Iida yelled, some sort of rock monsters. One is attacking us. 2 more are on their way to you. People, lock and load. Todoroki held the second beast in place while Kaminari charged, frying it before Kirishima blasted through it and killed it. Izuku snarled as he raised his rifle and peppered the head of an 8-legged beast that burst into the clearing. Bakugo and Kirishima then charged forward, Kirishima severing its legs and making it stumble as Bakugo detonated a devastating explosion that destroyed its body. Keep going. Together with his class, Izuku staggered out of the forest, trying to help Momo as they gazed at the mansion. Mineta whimpered as he fell, finally. That was intense, Mina complained as she leaned against Hagakure, who was equally worn out. Seriously, Kirishima muttered, turning to face Ojiro, who was assisting Shoji in guiding Sato and a fried Kaminari. You guys performed better than we anticipated. As they lumbered over to them, Mandalay grinned. We'll need 3 hours, you said, Mineta made an accusation. Oh, I suppose we were estimating the time it would have taken us to return here, Mandalay remarked casually. So harsh, sighed Kirishima. Well, you guys did a fantastic job, Pixie Bob joyfully yelled, leaping towards them, especially you 3. Izuku snorted as she started to swoon over Bakugo, Iida, and Kirishima. She shuddered slightly and remarked, glad she didn't snag me. Do you feel excluded? Momo asked naively, laughing when Izuku glared at her wearily. Papa. When Eri practically flew into Izuku's chest, he grunted and said, Hey princess, wheezing as he gave her a one-armed hug. How was the way? It was okay, she said timidly. Mister, I got a coloring book from Ms. Mandaman Mandy, and Zawa showed me photos of his cats. That's fantastic, he said with a fond smile, his eyes going to the young boy who was standing by the door, arms crossed as he glared at the class. Did you make a new friend? Eri lost her smile and muttered, no, disappointed, he doesn't want to talk to me. I'm sorry, Izuku said, but maybe he needs a little time to get used to it, because sometimes it's scary to make new friends. She smiled slightly again and said, okay. As they all gathered inside, Kirishima approached them, ruffling Eri's hair as he leaned in to whisper, let's get you kids fed, Mandalay called. I need to talk to you as soon as possible. As Kirishima continued as if nothing had happened, Izuku sighed in his head. Tonight's gonna be a long night, he murmured as they arrived at an indoor cafeteria. Momo walked up and sat down with Kirishima at one of the tables, asking, what was Kirishima wanting to talk to you about? He wanted some advice on hand-to-hand combat the other day, Izuku stated, and was just telling me to meet him later tonight for it. Momo inquired, will you need me to watch Eri? I'd be grateful. A smile crossed his face. She laughed and said, I'd be delighted. Bakugo sat down opposite them and growled, you two are nauseating. Don't be jealous, Izuku replied. Have you even tried to apologize to Uraraka? Of course I have. She walks away before I get the chance, he sighed, but it doesn't matter. We're here to get stronger, not try and date. The path to number 1 is a lonely one. Izuku laughed, but you don't have to ignore every other aspect of life, you know. As soon as food was set in front of them, Bakugo yelled, shut up you idiot. After a full day of not eating, they were all famished and unconcerned about looking ugly. With amazing eyes, Eri observed them all, clearly impressed by the teens' rapid eating. The tension of the day gradually started to melt away from their shoulders as they satisfied their hunger, and they started a lively discussion. Kota sneered scornfully as he watched. Izuku let out a sigh as he descended farther into the hot springs waters. The searing heat of the water helped relieve any residual tension in his shoulders. As Kaminari moaned, today was seriously killer, just what the doctor ordered. But we got through it with little to no problem, Shiro continued, thanks to our powerhouses in Midoriya. Sato slapped the shorter boy on the shoulder and remarked, yeah, you really know how to take charge, dude. I'm class president, kinda the job, He replied with a smirk, you guys would have had it under control without me. But still. Mineta started toward the divider wall, and Izuku rolled his eyes and leaned back against the hot spring's lip. The boy froze when he growled, Mineta. My girlfriend and a number of close friends are on the other side of that wall, as is my daughter. Are you sure you want to take the chance? He asked. Bakugo, his hands crackling with micro-explosions, woke up from his groping. Gulping, Mineta said, and no, then sit your ass down and don't go near that wall again or I'll pin you to it with my knife. His words were direct. As Mineta returned to the water next to the electric user, Kaminari laughed and said, hardcore much? You wouldn't really stab Mineta, would you? Izuku made the boy perspire by saying, if he tries to peep on my daughter and girlfriend, then yes. So you two are an actual item now? Zero inquired with interest. None of that, we act like a couple but we're not a couple, bullshit? Izuku acknowledged, I think we are, but we haven't really talked about it. Gotta talk about that kinda stuff, bro, Sato replied, you can't just assume. Yeah, and you gotta be tactful, Kaminari said again, not like Kachan over here. Bakugo bellowed, you wanna start a fight or something sparky? Dude, we can all tell you and Uraraka are having some kind of fight, Kirishima stated, or did you think we wouldn't notice? Gritted teeth, Bakugo snarled, it's not my fault she won't let me apologize. Then don't leave her alone when she walks away, Todoroki advised, keep pestering her until she hears you out. Sato laughed and said, look at Todoroki giving good advice. It'll end in one of two ways, Shoji murmured, either she listens to and accepts your apology, or she floats you into space. Izuku said, either way, I see it as a win. The boys laughed amicably. Before long, they started to depart one by one, leaving only Kirishima and Izuku. As he left, Iida yelled, don't stay too much longer, we don't want you two getting pruny. Izuku rolled his neck and sighed with relief as it popped, calling, whatever you say, Iida. So, I take it you accepted one for all? He asked, glancing sideways at Kirishima. Yeah, All Might gave it to me before I went to the buses this morning, Kirishima said, glancing down at his hands, it should be available now. He inquired, so what's the problem? Well, I don't know how to properly use it. As if it were clear, Izuku responded, of course not, that's why we're here to train. I know, Kirishima said with a frustrated grunt, but I can only harden my skin. His power is so different from mine, he can summon unfathomable strength. Making a tiny sound of comprehension, Izuku said, you want to be able to use it without giving away that it's an entirely different quirk. Something like that, yeah, he sighed his head. As he got up and reached for his towel, Izuku suggested, then concentrate on your quirk. I mean, your whole thing is durability, right? He asked. Kirishima reached for his own towel and confirmed, yeah, but I have a limit. When Kirishima hesitated, Izuku smirked and said, do you? All that immeasurable power and you can't fuse it with your quirk? Sounds like an excuse to me. Kirishima smiled and exclaimed, fuse. Durability, Midoriya, you're a genius. Before rushing out of the hot springs and coming back a few seconds later to retrieve his towel that had been left behind. Izuku sighed and followed Kirishima, saying, at least one of us is. The following day, as he led his class to a clearing, Vlad King sternly declared, we're here to train your quirks and surpass your limits, and to do that you'll have to push yourselves beyond anything you've ever known. Subaraba said, but how will we do that? We're going to push your quirks until they break, Vlad King declared as they entered the clearing, the students staring in disbelief at Class 1A. When you work out, your muscles tear and heal back stronger, that's what we're doing here. Stepping forward, Kendo said, this is crazy. Her eyes darted over the others to a strange glint in the distance as she watched Iida run full tilt around the clearing, swerving between Ojiro and Kirishima, who were engaged in combat. What's, she started, but was interrupted when a rubber bullet struck her forehead, sending her crashing to the ground. What in the, Monoma yelled as they all dispersed, with 1A following suit after Iida was also struck in the chest and sent sprawling. Kirishima was the only one who remained upright, standing fearlessly while scanning the clearing for the shooter's presence. Are we being attacked? Suyu reluctantly peered out from her cover and called from the cliff she had been climbing. Not even a shot was heard by me. From behind the overturned table where he and Momo had been seated, Sato snarled. Iida pulled himself up, rubbing his chest and trying to regain his breath, and said, to help train you all in situational awareness, we have tasked Midoriya to be something of a sniper. He's to take shots at anyone he catches slacking off or otherwise not paying attention. On the other side, should you spot him, then you're allowed to engage. Aizawa called, forcing everyone to look up. Now that we're all here, I can explain another aspect of your training. He watched as they helped Kendo up, the poor girl confused and suffering from a large bruise in the middle of her forehead. Ojiro sighed, so he's training in stealth and we get shot. Great. Have it? Kirishima slammed his fists together and yelled. Seeing him shouldn't be that difficult, right? He's a pretty big guy with a metal arm, Setsuna said, glancing at everyone. Am I just that? As Izuku turned off his cloaking and removed his helmet, smirking at everyone, Setsuna leapt and spun around. Don't think I came unprepared. He taunted, I'm going to make all of you work for it. That is unfair. From somewhere off to the side, Hagakure whimpered. Look at it this way, Izuku said, looking around the clearing. I can't see you, you can't see me. The rest of you, good luck. Izuku then put on his helmet and vanished. Is there anyone else who is utterly terrified at the moment? Kaminari inquired. Everyone, get back to work, Aizawa ordered. Let's get 1B situated, Vlad. Tiny motions. Every time a deer or other small forest animal darted out of the grass, he would advance a few inches. It was a long, agonizing journey that left him feeling as though he was not making any headway or progress. However, he was. He was moving slowly toward the students training on the artificial mountain. He could hear Tokiyami's cries and still see Tsuyu scaling the sheer face. When he heard a rustling close by, he froze and dared not even breathe because someone was walking right next to him. He stopped for a second and then slowly let out his breath, being cautious not to make any noises, as the figure eventually moved away and went to the table where Momo and Sato were seated. Sorry Frogger, he muttered as he slowly squeezed the trigger, the crack of the rifle covered by Bakugo's explosion. A few more inches and he was at the perfect position, slowly raising his rifle as he drew a bead on Tsuyu. Tsuyu lost focus and fell back down the mountain after the rubber round struck her back. Izuku remained motionless as a variety of quirks, including Rin's scales, Aoyama's naval laser, Abara's vines, Todoroki's fire, and Bakugo's explosion, suddenly struck the area around him. He was unharmed because they were all a few feet away. As Mina and Jiru helped Tsuyu up, Rin complained, looking at the tall grass and saying, damn it, I could have sworn he was there. Monsieur was definitely close, Aoyama said, clenching his stomach, I think we're close. Bakugo snarled and turned back to his training, while the others followed suit. Fucking nerd. After waiting a short while to make sure no one was watching, Izuku started the slow journey back to the tree line. An hour later, he arrived and gingerly stood up, turning off his cloaking as he vanished into the night. As he reloaded and rested next to a fallen tree, he muttered, that's 15 of the 19 1A students. He was frustrated that he was unable to hit Bakugo or Todoroki because they were too aware of him and had nearly hit him multiple times. Jiru also seemed to be able to hear him all the time and would frequently warn Mina when she knew he was nearby. Tokiyami had also been one of them. The cave he was in was difficult to reach, and Dark Shadow had thrown the paint bomb and flashbang he had thrown inside before they could explode. Rin Hirayu and Shiozaki Ibara, who had far superior situational awareness than their peers and were typically the first to try and attack him when he made himself known, were the only two he had managed to get with 1B. He whispered into his headgear, going for Shishida this time, informing Aizawa of his next target. It's going to be a long shot, 300 yards out, probably the only chance I have of getting him. You have enough time for 2 more hits, after that we call it quits for the night. Izuku signed off, starting his journey deeper into the forest with eyes on the lookout in case Aizawa had any more tricks up his sleeve. To date, he had come across bear traps, tripwires, spike pits filled with muck and an unpleasant-smelling liquid that he didn't want to know what it was, and multiple snares. Understood, ghost out. He soon came to a huge oak tree and started climbing it by hand until he was peeking out over the trees. Bit further than I intended, he muttered, unslinging his rifle and steadying it with a branch as he aimed down the scope and zoomed in until he could barely see the students training hard. He quickly singled out Rin and started calculating, adjusting for the distance and a slight wind pickup. Let's see you dodge this one. Izuku squeezed the trigger. 3, 2, 1. As the regular offenders started firing their quirks in his general direction, none of them striking him directly, Rin was hit in the forehead by the round, which sent him crumpling to the ground in agony. As he lined up the shot, Izuku whispered to himself, realigning. He focused on Shiozaki, who was scanning the area suspiciously, and said, that leaves 6 I haven't hit. Then he had an idea. He sighed as he mentally calculated the situation and slowly moved his crosshairs to the mountain. They're going to hate me for this, he said. Particularly between Mina and Jiru. He watched as the bullet bounced off the cliff face and into her back, knocking her off her feet as it bounced into Mina's stomach and then off into Abara's leg. He saw Jiru shout about another shot as the hypersonic round flew through the sky with another squeeze of the trigger. He started to descend the tree, growling, "Damn, off by a foot." Aizawa said into the headset, "I shouldn't count that. The bullet wouldn't have bounced off the cliff face in real life." As he hit the floor, Izuku retorted, "But this isn't real life. Besides, in an urban setting, I can definitely figure out how to ricochet the bullet off metal fixtures. I'll allow it, now bring it in, and don't be surprised if some of the others try and take a shot at you." Izuku grinned and said, "Copy that," as he hoofed it through the forest, avoiding a snare and another bear trap. "This is too easy," he laughed. Click. Boom. With a sly smile, Aizawa called out to the 29 astonished students who were watching the pink mushroom cloud rise through the forest, "Keep in mind, kids," reminding them to always be mindful of their footsteps. Izuku sat down slowly on one of the benches, his armor and everything underneath it all covered in a vivid pink. He slowly took off his helmet and placed it on the table while he peered around. "What on earth struck you?" Bakugo approached with Eri perched on his shoulders and inquired. "Papa, you're pink." Eri laughed. Izuku grinned and said, "That I am," as Eri leapt down and joyfully sat in his lap. "I stepped on a mine," he told Bakugo, "but a single mine got me." He had avoided snares, bear traps, and spike pits. Bakugo scoffed and sat down too, drinking a lot of water. "Loser," he said. As Eri started to slyly reach for his helmet, Izuku retorted, "My score is 37/1, and I'm planning on getting you in Todoroki tomorrow." He scoffed and said, "Good luck, nerd." As the pussycats brought out raw meat and vegetables, he explained that they would be cooking for themselves that evening. "Excuse me, I need to go show these extras how to cook." Bakugo stood up and walked over to the ingredients, followed by a few others. When he saw that Eri was wearing his pink helmet, Izuku snorted and turned to face her. "How was your day?" After removing the helmet from her and placing it on the table, he inquired. "Have fun," Eri chirped. "I did some coloring." "That's fantastic. Am I able to see?" As they waited for them to finish for the day, the father-daughter pair sat for a few minutes, examining the vibrant pages that Eri had completed. They only stopped when Bakugo called on him for assistance. "Avoid Pikachu in my darn kitchen." Kaminari cowered away as Bakugo roared. Izuku sighed and said, "On my way," before slowly getting up and placing Eri on the bench. "I'll be right back, kiddo," he said, giving her a quick nose bop that made her laugh, and then he approached Bakugo. While the students were busy preparing food, Eri picked up his helmet once more and put it on while cheerfully surveying his surroundings. This is most likely why she was the only one who noticed Kota approaching a path that was difficult to see. Eri paused after taking off the helmet because the older boy had mistreated her the day before, but then she recalled her papa's advice that it's hard making new friends. She nodded endearingly gravely as she leapt off the bench and ran after Kota, holding the helmet to her chest. As he turned to assist Kaminari in recovering what he could from the partially burned pot of curry, Izuku looked up and saw Eri running after the sullen Kota while humming to himself. Thinking of the students back in the clearing, Kota frowned as he glared over the forest's trees. "What a bunch of heroes," he grumbled, "who would want to be a hero?" "Hello." When Kota saw Eri standing shyly behind him, clutching a pink helmet as she approached him hesitantly, he jumped, turned around, and frowned. "Get out of here," he demanded, "this is my secret spot." "Oh," looking regretful, Eri said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I just wanted to talk to you. Can we be friends?" He turned away from her and said sharply, "No, now leave this place." Eri, really perplexed as to why he was being so cruel, said, "But why not? You're with those heroes," Kota spat, mockingly, "and I don't want to be friends with some hero fangirl." "What's wrong with liking heroes?" replied Eri, "My papa's a hero and he's the bestest hero ever." "Your pops is probably only a hero for the popularity that comes with it." Eri yelled angrily, "No he's not, he wants to help people. My father is a true hero." Eri. Eri swiftly spun around, her eyes brightening, and saw Izuku approaching them while wearing a shirt that was slightly discolored pink and without his armor from the waist up. "Papa, Kota says you're not a real hero, but I know he's lying," she cried as she leapt toward him. "Thank you for believing in my princess," Izuku said, ruffling her hair and making her laugh. "Momo has a plate of curry for you. Why don't you run back and eat with her? I'll be along soon." "All right, Papa," she said, giving Kota a final look before turning to leave. Izuku approached Kota cautiously, and Kota stiffened. Izuku pulled out a pack of cigarettes and said, "Calm down, kid. Can't smoke around the lodge, they get mad, so how about we keep it a secret, between you and me," he said, holding up his hand placatingly. Kota turned away from him and muttered, "HMPH, whatever," as Izuku lit the cigarette by putting it between his lips. Looking around the clearing and then over the cliff, Izuku exclaimed, "Nice little hideout you got here, kid. A little risky for my taste, but as long as you're careful." "Shut up," said Kota, "we're not friends. And we'll never be friends. I don't want to be friends with some wannabe heroes and their brats." Izuku gave him a scowl but remained silent, allowing the boy to carry on. "Why would you even want to be a hero?" he grumbled, "a bunch of idiots trying to show off their quirks." "For some maybe, but I'm quirkless," Izuku laughed. "But, then, why are you trying to be a hero?" Kota asked, his eyes widening. Izuku stated, "Because I want to help people," without glancing at Kota, "and being a hero is the best way to do that." "But what if you get hurt?" With a sorrowful smile, Izuku raised his hand to display his prosthetic in the dim sunlight and muttered, "Then I learn, and get better." What happened?" Kota asked, winced, and then turned away. Izuku said, lowering his hand back to his side, "Some villains attacked our high school, and I had to step up because they wanted to hurt our teachers and us." But you're just a student," Kota yelled. "Why would you put yourself in harm's way?" Looking up at the sky as it started to fade into muted oranges and purples, Izuku said, "Because if I didn't then my classmates would have been hurt. We weren't very close when the attack happened, only a week into the new year after all. But I knew that if I were to simply run away, save myself, then everyone I left behind would have still been in danger, so I had to grit my teeth and fight, and do what I could to save them." But you didn't know them, and it wasn't your job," Kota murmured. "True, wasn't my job," Izuku responded, "and I really didn't know them, but I knew they were innocent, that they didn't deserve to get injured because some villain decided to go on a rampage. And besides, I'm training to be a hero, and heroes don't stop being heroes just because things are a little dangerous. We lay our lives on the line so that normal people don't have to, so that they can be safe and secure." He glanced at Kota. "Your parents were heroes, weren't they? Everyone keeps saying that they went out like heroes and that their deaths were honorable, but what does that matter?" "They left me," Kota sniffed, blotting away the tears that were gathering in the corners of his eyes. "Kota," Izuku said softly as he knelt next to the boy, "your parents are with you, they didn't abandon you." Kota stepped back from Izuku and yelled angrily, "What does that even mean? Why does everyone keep saying that? They're not here." "I used to ask the same thing, kid." Izuku sighed, flicking his crumpled cigarette into the forest below. "They'll always tell you, they're in a better place, or, they're still with you. All it does is make you mad. What place is better than here with me? If they're here, why can't I see them? No one ever sits down and takes the time to explain what they mean." Izuku sat back and let his leg hang off the ledge. "You lost a loved one?" Kota muttered. Izuku looked at Kota, who was now staring back at him with tears streaming down his cheeks, and said, "My girlfriend was my life, the one bright spot in my life. When I lost her, I was broke, aimless, and didn't know what I would do or even if I'd make it through the day. And all I would be told Ayasashi was in a better place, she was still here with you, and it made me angry, made me mad. But I learned, after months of pain, that those words aren't just some token words that we use to try to dismiss someone's pain." He reached out and tapped Kota's forehead, saying, "They're in your memories, all those fond ones you had of them, and," his hand moved down and he tapped his chest, saying, "They're in your heart. Their love for you will never die, Kota, and their spirit will always be watching over you." Izuku groaned slightly as Kota suddenly began to hug him, sobbing into his chest, and he put his arms around the boy, trying his best to console the boy who was crying. And so they sat for a few minutes until Kota stopped sobbing and drew away from Izuku, sniffling and wiping his eyes before mumbling, "Thanks," and avoiding eye contact. The sound of a branch breaking made Izuku's eyes sharpen. "No problem, kid," he said with a friendly smile as he got up. "Why don't you head back, go get some food? I'll be along shortly." He tapped his pack of cigarettes, causing Kota to nod. He hastily added, "Okay, I won't tell anyone." Izuku laughed as Kota started to leave. He waited until he was certain the boy was far enough away before turning and throwing a knife at a nearby bush. He heard the blade sinking into meat and rushed at the bush, removing a compact Glock from his boot holster as he crashed through the foliage. "Knew you were a good kid." When he discovered the bush was empty except for a patch of blood on the ground and leaves, his eyes narrowed. As he examined the blood on the bush, Aizawa remarked, "So, you heard something in the bushes and threw a knife." Izuku stood with his arms crossed, the Vlad King and Tiger at his sides. "Yeah," he replied, waited until Kota was far enough away, didn't want him accidentally getting caught in a fight. Vlad King remarked harshly, "The evidence suggests that someone or something was in the bush when you threw that knife, but the question still stands. Was it an animal? Or was it an inappropriate person up here?" "Couldn't have been an animal," said the tiger, "otherwise there'd be a dead bird or fox in there. And if it had survived the hit, then it would have jumped out of the bush as soon as it could." Izuku continued, "There was someone up here, well versed in espionage. If I didn't even know they were here until I heard a branch snap. We should contact Ua and get some additional heroes here." "You can go back to your class," Vlad said sharply. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Midoriya, but this is now in our hands." And Izuku began, "Mr. Aizawa, please, your concerns are being taken into consideration, Midoriya," Aizawa stated, giving him a serious look. "I promise we'll be doing whatever we can to ensure the safety of the other students. You're dismissed. And keep this to yourself for now, no need to cause a panic." After a moment of hesitation, Izuku nodded and turned to leave. As Izuku walked away, Tiger mutely questioned, "How soon would we be able to get other heroes here?" "Sadly, only Nezu will listen to us in regards to there being a breach," Aizawa murmured, "and the other teachers are neck deep in their own hero work. He'll have to contact someone outside of Ua. We may be able to get Deadshot here, but he's about the only other hero I can think of that can get out here on such short notice. If they can get some heroes here by tomorrow afternoon or evening at the latest, we'll let Nezu know about this potential breach," Vlad stated. "Isn't that about all we can ask for?" Aizawa muttered, "Let's go, we need to make some calls." Izuku's attempt to eliminate Bakugo or Todoroki was unsuccessful. He spent the majority of the day scuttling through the forest and scouting the farther reaches that were within their reach because he was too preoccupied with the growing likelihood of an attack on the camp. He had not discovered any signs of any other spies, but he was certain that they were out there, merely observing them and waiting for their opportunity to attack. "Izuku?" Momo called as he walked towards them at the end of the day, his helmet off and looking deep in thought. "Izuku. You're distracted. What's wrong?" she repeated as she approached him, nudging him gently and making him jump. He smiled wearily and reassured her, "Nothing," saying, "Just tired. Aizawa set up more traps out there." "Well, I'm sure that getting some food will help." Momo smiled warmly as she spoke. "Hey, Midoriya. Hey man, do you think you could help me with my quirk before we do the evening training?" Kirishima called as she walked over to them grinning broadly. "I believe I've nearly figured out that new form." Izuku sighed and looked helplessly at Momo. He kissed her forehead and said, "I'll try and finish up quick." "Avoid exerting yourself." As the two made their way into the forest, she called. "Those two fools are going where?" Bakugo walked up with Ares sitting on his shoulders, contentedly consuming a juice box, and asked sternly. Momo sighed and looked at Bakugo. "Something about quirk training for Kirishima. So, have you talked to Uraraka yet?" she asked, smiling when he grunted. "You know she's not gonna just sit around and wait, right?" she asked. "I know," he growled, "but she always runs away and stays with Pinky and See-Through, and they won't let me get close to her." Momo pulled Eri off Bakugo's shoulders and let her run after Kota, who was standing awkwardly off to the side, attempting to, discreetly, gesture for Eri to approach. "I'll take care of those two," Momo said, adding, "You just worry about getting a good apology out to Uraraka and not insult her." "I wasn't attempting to provoke her," Bakugo yelled, causing Momo to laugh. "I know, Bakugo, now let's go." As they made their way to Uraraka, Mina, and Toru, Bakugo complained, "Mina, Toru, could you please help me with dinner tonight? We must begin chopping the vegetables," she said. "All right. Come on, Uraraka," Mina started, but she stopped when Momo raised a hand. With a soft smile, she stated, "Actually I need Uraraka to help Bakugo, since she's one of the few here that actually knows how to cook." Uraraka stiffened instantly, glaring at Bakugo in an unsubtle way and making him sigh. "Are you certain, Yao Momo?" Nervously, Toru said, "Perhaps I should assist?" "You can burn water Invisalign," Bakugo snarled. "Let's go," and Uraraka walked stiffly behind him as he made his way to the fire pits. "I'll prepare the meat," she whispered as she walked over to a blue cooler. "You cook it." "Cheeks. We have to get dinner started, Bakugo," she said sharply, removing the beef packets without turning to face him. With a growl suppressed, Bakugo approached, dragged one of the packets to him, and tore it open. "I said I'd prep them. You need to start dinner, don't you?" Her previous statement that both of us working together will make things go faster, was parodied by Bakugo. As they started to quietly prepare the meat for the grill by seasoning and tenderizing it, Uraraka muttered something under her breath but remained silent. Bakugo felt the tension in his shoulders start to release as they worked, and his frown softened to a frown. He slowly placed the meat on the grill and said, "Uraraka," until she looked up, startled by how quietly he spoke. Uraraka, I'm sorry." He turned to face her and crossed his arms, saying, "I'm sorry, for what I said about you about 3 weeks ago." He ran his hand through his hair and sighed in frustration. "I'm not used to using my words," he complained, "and you frustrate me, damn it. I wasn't trying to call you fat or imply it. I was trying to ask you to train with me, and it didn't come out right and it just got jumbled up and." "Do I irritate you?" Uraraka's eyebrows furrowed as she asked in bewilderment. "Yes, you do," he swore. "Why do I find it so difficult to communicate with you out of all the people in this fucking class? Every time I speak with you, I make a mistake, and it's your fault, damn it." With a hint of amusement in her voice, she asked, "How is that my fault?" As Uraraka started to laugh, he blushed and stopped, saying, "It just is, with your stupid cute roundness and, it's not funny," he growled angrily. She giggled and nudged him in a friendly manner, saying, "It kind of is." He scoffed but grinned a little as Uraraka sighed. "I guess I'm sorry too," she murmured. "I haven't exactly been acting maturely about all of this." He remarked mockingly, "Really, I never would have guessed." She nudged him once more and made him nudge her back. "Don't be a jerk," she said. "So, we're good?" Bakugo asked uncertainly. She smiled broadly and said, "Yeah, we're good, now help me get this meat cooked." Bakugo gave her a slight smile before turning back to the grill. However, a strange glint in his eyes made him defensive right away. "Uraraka, watch out!" Bakugo yelled, pushing her aside as blue flames engulfed the grill and the immediate vicinity. Those with slower reflexes fell in as Shiro, Pony, half of Tokage, Tsuyu, and Tokiyami managed to escape the portals after dodging attacks from all directions. Bakugo curled protectively around Uraraka as they crashed into the ground, his eyes catching a glimpse of portals opening up beneath his class. As they hid behind the other grills, Bakugo asked Uraraka, "Are you all right?" The girl nodded and looked around the clearing in disbelief. Men wearing masks resembling birds were encircling the lodge, with a giant man at their head trading blows with Tiger, and Mandalay was avoiding a taller man holding a huge magnet and a lizard dressed like a stain. Mandalay yelled at the remaining pupils, "Barricade ourselves inside the lodge." Shiro swung between the minions, avoiding a quirk that threw razor-sharp leaves and using his tape to bring the assailant close enough to knock him out. "We're cut off," he cried. Dark Shadow leapt forward, slammed another cluster away, and then staggered back as blue flames engulfed the area as Tsuyu hopped between the villains, her powerful legs sending several flying as she flipped over Tokiyami. Bakugo snarled as his gaze focused on the assailant. "Die, asshole," he commanded, charging at the blue flame user. "Get to the lodge, Uraraka." Kirishima cried out, "The explosions are coming from the lodge," as Izuku dashed through the foliage with her at his side. Izuku's eyes scanned the battlefield. Tsuyu and Pony were surrounded, and Shiro was shielding Tokage and Uraraka as they fled for the lodge. Bakugo was currently releasing powerful explosions against intense blue flames and preventing Dabi from attacking the heroes, who had their hands full with the giant man in the plague mask. "Damn it," Izuku growled as they exploded into the clearing, Izuku's guns coming up and peppering the closest goons with rounds, sending them crumpling to the ground as Kirishima charged forward, sending many flying. "You help Shiro, and I'll help Tsuyu and Pony," Kirishima yelled, his fists clenched. Izuku shot at the Yakuza encircling Tsuyu and Pony, saying, "No, Kirishima, you need to take on that giant. You're the only one with the firepower." With trembling hands, Kirishima cried out, "I haven't mastered it yet." The boy holding his jaw where Izuku had punched him said, "We have Yakuza attacking. Most of our class is not here, which means they're scattered again. I need you to take out their big fucking guns before we get fucked." Izuku grabbed him by the front of his shirt and snarled, "Grit your teeth and suck it the fuck up," as he pushed Kirishima away. I can't," Kirishima froze, the situation's weight finally sinking in. Izuku angrily questioned, "If you can't, then who? What are you here to be, Kirishima?" "You're right, Midoriya," Kirishima said, his eyes hardening as steam started to roll off him. He then suddenly bulked up, ripping through his shirt and gaining a few inches of height. "Full infusion. Red Gauntlet," he exclaimed as he launched himself into the forest, shattering the ground beneath him as he struck the giant man's stomach with his fist. "Get to the lodge," Izuku commanded her as he reloaded an Ifred, causing the thugs to momentarily retreat. "About fucking time," he said with a savage grin as he crashed into the thugs surrounding Tsuyu. Tsuyu questioned, "How is Kirishima that strong?" As she leapt for the lodge where Bakugo was running toward them, the villain he had been fighting reduced to a heap of melted mud, and Pony and Zero were fending off a few more thugs. Izuku remarked, "It's a new aspect of his quirk he came up with to be on par with All Might," as he observed his friend effortlessly sparring with the enormous Yakuza thug. Instead of hardening just his skin, he hardens his entire body, every molecule, and then allows them to bend but not break. He calls it full infusion. Tsuyu croaked, "That really is amazing," as they arrived at the lodge. Izuku asked, "Where are the others?" as he took his M4 out of the interior and started to put out a suppressive fire to give the heroes some space. As he recorded some villains who had been unlucky enough to not flee, Zero remarked, "Most got portaled away. Tokiyami is in the office with Sato, they're calling the heroes." With just her head, a portion of her chest, and her right arm visible at the moment, Setsuna exclaimed, "We don't know where Eri and Kota are. I was gonna send some parts of me to go find them when Yaoyorozu asked and the portal crap happened." Izuku moaned, "Damn it," and yelled, "I know where they are, Bakugo," to the boy who had blasted Magna into the air. He turned to face Izuku and roared, "What? Eri and Kota are in danger. We need to get to them." Bakugo yelled, "Then let's fucking go," and hurled himself at Izuku as he dashed for the cliffs. Izuku called back to Zero and said, "Help where you can." He ran as hard as he could toward the cliff, pleading with Eri to be okay. "Do what you can to get in contact with the others." Muscular sneered, well, as he peered down at Kota and Eri. Eri was hiding behind a terrified Kota, and the big man stepped forward, followed by another big man wearing a bird mask. Rappa loomed over her and remarked, "Well, if it isn't little Eri, Overhaul's been looking for you." Anarchy. Momo could best describe the fighting around her. Like the USJ, they were split up, but they soon came together again. Kaminari was using his static-covered fists to punch back the villains, while Shiozaki's vines were slashing out to restrain the unconscious villains. Garuda was running through his opponents, roaring as Mina slid around him. They could hear Mandalay's urgent messages to return to the lodge, but they couldn't even consider doing so until their opponents were defeated. Momo wasn't standing still either. She had her usual staff out, sending villains flying with every swing, and her Marikosha dolls were causing chaos with their flash bangs and hidden smoke canisters. She rolled forward to dodge a stone man, and as a gun barrel emerged from her palm, her right hand came up, peppering him with automatic fire and making him cross his arms in front of him in an effort to block the rounds. "Yaoyorozu duck." Ida's voice instantly caused Momo to bend at the waist as the boy with the engine leg blasted into the clearing, sending the stone man flying through multiple trees with his jet-powered leg. Awase yelled, "Get stuck in it, motherfuckers," as he leapt through the foliage, followed closely by Tsuburaba, Rin, and Ojiro. The weld quirk user wasted no time in slamming his elbows and fists into Yakuza thugs before welding them to trees and the ground. Ojiro was heading to Kaminari's aid, snarling, spinning, and slamming his tail through a group of Yakuza, leaping away when a bull-headed brute charged forward, only to be stopped by solid air from Tsuburaba. Kaminari electrocuted him, and a newly arrived Bondo bound him. As the students waited for the next attack, the clearing fell silent, and Ida moved forward once they were certain they were safe for the time being. Juru, Monoma, Yanagi and Tetsu are heading for the training grounds, he told them. Juru could hear fighting coming from there. "I don't know who's there, but I recommend we proceed there with haste." "I agree," Garuda said, advancing. "We can't help the others if we don't know where they are. Hopefully Kota is with those at the training grounds. With him and Juru we can find the others and Ashido watch out." Garuda charged at the blonde girl who had just hurt his friend, roaring as he did so. That was Mina's only warning before a knife was stabbed in her back, and the pink girl cried out in agony as she fell forward. "Oh poo, her blood isn't pink." The girl laughed. "It still makes her pretty though," as she landed in a tree after effortlessly vaulting over him and licking the blood off her knife. Rin snarled, "You bitch!" His hands reached up and swung his scales at the insane girl, who easily evaded the attack. Her knife flashed out to cut Shiozaki's vines before landing on Ojiro's shoulders. She then slashed her knife across his face, causing the boy to scream in agony as blood spurted from the fresh wound that ran from his right temple to his left jaw. Momo yelled, "Ojiro!" Her eyes grew piercing as she aimed her palm at the psychopath, sending a quick burst of fire through the girl's chest, turning her to mud. Holy shit. Awase muttered as he ran to Mina's side with the others. Shiozaki and Bondo carried Ojiro over, trying their best to assist the bleeding boy. Ojiro gritted his teeth and growled, I can't see. Jesus fuck that hurt. Who the devil was it? Awase knelt beside Mina, who was crying as Momo attended to her wound, and asked. As she watched the tree line, Rin muttered, a psychopath, I don't like this, we need to get out of here. Iida said sharply, we won't go anywhere until we heal our friends. Kaminari nodded in agreement. Momo nodded and hurried to assist Ojiro after Awase said, let me help. Shiozaki took her place next to Awase, her hand firmly gripping Mina's hand. This is gonna hurt like a bitch, he warned Mina, who laughed in pain. Surely it couldn't be worse than being stabbed. As skin, muscle, and bone were reassembled, she whimpered in pain and gripped Shiozaki's hand as she asked, gritting her teeth in anticipation of Awase's quirk. Sorry, said Awase as she got up and turned to face Momo, who was tending to Ojiro. The boy had fainted while he was assisting Mina. So Momo whispered, concerned about her lower lip, this wound is deep, and he lost a lot of blood. We need to get him back to the lodge. Rin noted, we still need to help those at the training grounds. Shiozaki, who was soothingly petting Mina's hair while the girl looked drawn and unsteady, said, Ashido has lost a lot of blood as well, and Kaminari is nearing his limit. We may need to divide and conquer. I propose that we send our best to support our allies in combat, Iida declared. I'll accompany the wounded before coming back to your sides, with reinforcements, hopefully. No, you need to head to the training ground. Momo replied with a straight face, with Ojiro and Mina injured we can't go very fast, and you're needed on the front lines Iida. I'll go with the injured. She glanced at her companions. Rin, Jiruta, Subaraba, and Bondo can go with you. The rest of us can get the injured to the lodge. Let us move quickly, Shiozaki said, nodding, because it's our best course of action. As Momo accompanied the injured, she thought anxiously, please be okay, Midoriya, Eri. Kota backed up slowly, keeping Eri at his heels as he looked fearfully at the two large men. All he wanted to do was play heroes and villains with the other kid and apologize for being a jerk, but now that he had villains in front of him, he wasn't sure if the camp could hear him if he yelled. Hey kid, you want to exchange me for this dumb mask? That's a cool hat. They had nothing better than this, but that hat? Muscular sneered as he moved forward to remove his generic mask. Don't worry kid, we're just here for Eri, send her over and you can go, Rappa said sternly, advancing a few paces before halting when Kota retreated once more and Eri peered around him, staring at Rappa in terror. We got a job to do Muscular, he said. Rappa glared at Muscular as he scoffed, hey, right. My job is getting Eri, nothing else. Well, that is dull, I'd like to see blood. Leering at Kota and making him tremble in fear, Muscular laughed. Muscular growled low as Rappa suddenly appeared in his face and said, you touch those kids and I kill you. Muscular jeered, your master wouldn't be too happy if you decided to attack us. I am not a slave to anyone. Rappa snarled, his fists clenched. I'm here because Overhaul won't rematch with me until we get Eri back, but if that means just sitting back while you kill the kid, then I don't need a rematch. You are a traitor, then. Rappa took the punch to the chin and didn't flinch, but Muscular laughed as he flexed, his muscle fibers exploding from his body. You want a death game, don't you? As the massive MMA fighter charged, Rappa asked, his smile almost feral as he slammed a punch into Muscular's stomach, sending him flying back and crashing into the mountainside before exploding back out to meet Rappa. Go! The mountain behind them appeared to burst as the two formidable villains faced off. Kota yelled, practically pulling Eri with him as he took off. The girl stumbled briefly before catching up to him. What are we going to do? During their run, Eri sobbed. Just keep running, with a gasp, Kota said. Kid, get back here. Rappa was slowly pushing himself up against the mountain, covered in blood but otherwise fine. Rappa roared as he charged, fist cocked back and ready to kill Muscular. Muscular snarled as he charged at them, his right leg appearing broken and his arm hanging uselessly. He wouldn't arrive in time, though, perish. Muscular flew back into Rappa's fist as an explosion tore through the air. I got you, jerk, Rappa growled as he slammed Muscular into the mountain once more. The villain sighed in fear as he fell to the ground, blood accumulating beneath his body. Are you okay, brats? Bakugo glared at Rappa and asked harshly as the wounded villain pushed Muscular with his foot. Kitty-san. Eri applauded and started to give the boy a leg hug, but she stopped when he raised a hand. Bakugo, who was watching Rappa as the enormous fighter started to approach them, commanded, "Izuku's coming up, go meet him." "Get moving." As Bakugo exploded a couple of tiny explosions, Kota whispered to Eri and pulled her with him. Rappa grunted and popped his neck, saying, "Not too bad, kid. You killed him good, makes me wanna see what you can do." Bakugo snarled, tiny explosions crackling on his palms, "What I can do is pummel you into next week and then blast your shitty friends to bits." "Alright. I wanted this." Rappa crowed and threw himself at Bakugo, who ducked around him with ease and fired straight at him. Perish. As the explosion shook the mountainside, Eri staggered slightly into Kota. "Get moving. Don't slow down." As they ran on, Kota prodded her and helped her maintain her balance. "Kota. Eri. Papa." Her father was sprinting towards them, not slowing down as he tackled them both to the ground, barely sparing them from a hail of bullets from the trees, when Eri screamed as they exploded from the foliage. "Stay hidden. Keep going," he ordered them, his handguns flashing as he returned fire. "Kota, get Eri to the lodge and protect her. I'll be right at your heels." "All right." As he pulled Eri to her feet, Kota sobbed. The girl sobbed as they took off, with Izuku trailing behind him as he kept shooting. "Eri. Kota." As they got closer to the lodge, Tsuyu yelled, protecting the two kids as Izuku carried on fighting the fire. "Enter Tsuyu with them." Izuku yelled as he dodged the bullets splattering the ground around him and slammed a hard knee into the jaw of an approaching Yakuza. "Midoriya!" Kirishima shouted, sliding in front of him to tank the rounds while Izuku fired at the few remaining Yakuza. Mandalay and Tiger were mopping up the last of the attackers on the other side of the clearing. "We need to go help Bakugo. He is engaged in combat with a Yakuza member. We must." Izuku gasped slightly as the earth slipped away from him. "Midoriya! Midoriya!" Kirishima lunged for his friend's hand as he watched him fall into the portal and yelled. "Keep Eri safe." Izuku exited before he vanished, and Kirishima's hand slammed into the ground as the portal closed behind him. With his eyes wide, Kirishima collapsed to his knees and stared at the location where Midoriya had disappeared. "No," he muttered, his fist curling into a fist before punching it back down. The ground was shattered by his punch as he roared. As the tracking software in his helmet came to life, Izuku landed in a roll, avoiding multiple rounds before hiding behind a tree, reloading his pistols, and preparing his wrist gauntlet. "You're fucking with the wrong class, asshole." "Gotcha," he muttered, turning off the tracker and firing all three guns as he activated his optical camouflage and moved slowly around the tree to the right, focusing on the silhouette of a woman in the trees. She was short, with short brown hair, wearing a black bodysuit covered by a green yukata, and her face and eyes were hidden behind a smiling Cheshire cat mask. The sniper fell out of the tree with a cry of pain, dropping the custom rifle from her hand as she vaulted back, clutching the graze on her arm she had sustained from Izuku's shots. Izuku moved quickly, just avoiding multiple knives that were embedded in the tree behind his previous position. With a few more blades flicking into her hands, the woman drew lead. "Your tech is impressive. Lucky you to be ready." Izuku fired again, this time backflipping into the trees to avoid the hurling knives and moving on as she appeared to follow him. Luck's got nothing to do with it. As Izuku leapt towards her, the camouflage deactivated and a combat knife glinted in his hand. She grabbed the blade in her fan and flipped it out of his grasp before bringing the other up and slashing Izuku across his armor. The sound of metal scratching metal caused Izuku to disengage, looking down at his scratched armor in shock. "A Tessin," Izuku muttered, glaring at her. "You're not the only one with tracking software," her growled. She laughed and opened her other Tessin, revealing spikes emerging from the fan's spines. "Always full of surprises," she said. After dodging a few blows and deflecting the ones he couldn't with his vambraces, Izuku growled, "Enough," and raised his wrist gun to fire a fully automatic salvo at the woman, forcing her to dodge and deflect with her fans before vanishing into the canopy. Izuku snarled and ducked behind a tree to reload his weapons, saying, "Your attack has been in vain. We got pros en route." She asked, "Has it?" as she cautiously flanked the gunslinger, slipping through the branches like a forest cat and saying, "Your friends are scattered. Many are probably dead, and the cabin is surrounded. It's only a matter of time before that horned-headed brat is captured. You touch my daughter and I'll kill you," Izuku yelled. "You harm a single hair on her head and there's nowhere you can hide to escape my wrath." "You haven't changed a bit, Izu." With sharpened eyes, Izuku cut the familiarity psycho. He growled and shot rounds into the canopy, making her dodge while laughing the entire time. Izuku retaliated by punching her back and raising his wrist gun, only to have it fall apart when a thrown fan sliced through it. "Bitch," he growled, reaching down to his boots and drawing combat knives. She spun down her flying axle kick, knocking one gun out of his hand before a swipe of her fan sent the other flying. She purred, a sigh slipping into her free hand as she suddenly flew at him in a tornado of lethal steel, striking a combat stance, just keeping things even. Shota Aizawa felt irate. "No, I'm blazingly angry, not just angry, to think that his class had once again been overrun by bad guys, and that these bad guys weren't the D-class thugs at the USJ. Instead, they were Yakuza, and they were a formidable force." Larceny had taken his knife and combat scarf. Shoji was bloodied from a hungry Tabe chomping through his tentacles with sickening fervor, and he had nearly lost Hagakure and Mineta when Hojo had attempted to cave their heads in upon dropping from the portal. Aizawa growled, "Get away from my students," and slammed his knee into Tabe's head, sending him flying into Hojo before Larceny was sucked up by the earth and hurled directly into a tree. Shoji dropped to his knees and muttered, "Thank God." Tojo began, "Don't get comfortable yet," but was cut off by a flying steel fist. Hagakure exclaimed, "Tetsu Tetsu," as the frowning full steel user stumbled out of the foliage, carrying an unconscious Kota and Kodai. He appeared a little unsteady on his feet, and Pixie Bob was behind him, also unsteady. Gas. Aizawa hurried to Pixie Bob's side as she gasped and fell. Aizawa steadies Tetsu Tetsu as he carefully places the two students he is carrying down. "Hagakure, Shoji, Mineta. Help me with them," he orders. "We got out, but a lot of people unconscious. Gotta go back," he wheezed, leaning against the tree as the other three students checked on their peers. "Gas villain." Aizawa retrieved his capture scarf and stood up, saying sternly, "I'll go and get them. Stay here and rest, that's an order." Aizawa had to balance himself on a nearby tree as the others fell to the ground as the world started to tilt. Hagakure held her head while groaning, "The world's spinning." Mineta whimpered, "I feel dizzy, Mr. Aizawa, like bad." Shoji whispered, Is this the affect of the gas?" "No, this ain't it." Tetsu Tetsu gritted his teeth and said, "This is something else." "How right you are." Aizawa glanced up and scowled at the approaching figures. One was stumbling on unsteady legs, while the other was advancing with purpose. More than a dozen Yakuza were standing behind them, laughing and jeering at them. The stumbling man cackled, "Hee, you guys are acting like you're drunk." Aizawa's stomach dropped when she heard a revolver's hammer being cocked. "Sakari's quirk makes it hard to keep your wits about you," the other man said arrogantly, "and now, you'll be meeting your fates." Bang. Schom. The bullet bounced between the trees and struck Sakari after a flash of yellow dragged Aizawa out of its path. Was almost late. Before he could cock the gun again, Aizawa felt his head clear and hurled his capture scarf at the other Yakuza. The other Yakuza stepped back in disbelief as they saw the squat old man standing aggressively on top of Sakari with his yellow cape flapping out behind him. With an odd tone in his voice, he exclaimed, "How did you escape the effects of his quirk?" The elderly man grunted and glared at the Yakuza, saying, "You ran into bad luck when I was contacted about this here attack. You don't fly around at the speed of a jet without getting used to nausea real quick." As Kota started to stir, Aizawa was awakened by a rustle in the bushes and three more heroes emerged, quickly wrapping branches around the unconscious Yakuza. A young hero in a field medic's uniform ran up to the injured, his hands glowing softly, saying to the students, "It's not much, but it'll help." Death Arms grunted, scanning the forest with narrowed eyes as Kamui Woods and Psyche moved up next to him. "Old geezer blasted past us before I could even blink. Glad we got here in time to help." Kamui. Death Arms. How did ... Aizawa started. Psyche grinned and said, "He called me, and I had some favors with local heroes. Have no fear, Ua," as a number of Yakuza were hauled from the ground amid astonished cries of surprise. Nezu called up Deadshot. As Death Arms charged through a few more, Kamui was wrapping up the newly captured Yakuza and slamming them into the trees when Mount Lady's fist suddenly grew and lashed out, knocking them unconscious. "The Mustafu Relief Force is here." Heal Up was carrying unconscious children to the clearing where Aizawa and his students were, while Psyche ran through the forest, trying to heal what he could while Kamui and Death Arms cared for the Yakuza behind him. As she was attempting to swat off multiple Yakuza attempting to scale her legs, Mount Lady yelled down at him, "Psyche! That gas is dissipating, and I see fighting at the training fields." He called back, "I'm on my way." and darted between the trees, looking for any students who hadn't been located yet in the tall grass and brush. When he arrived at the training grounds, the fighting had stopped, and he could see that a number of students were carrying or assisting their peers in getting up. Deadshot was in the middle of all of them, helping Tenya Iida of Class 1A bandage a cut on his arm. As he finished Iida's bandage, Deadshot said to him, "Nice of you to join us. Kids are safe here, we're going to head to the lodge, help where we can there." "Sounds like a plan to me. We got quite a few students along with Erasure and Pixie Bob in a clearing to the south. Kamui Woods and the others should be finishing up soon. We're all gonna meet at." Crack. Boom. As a red blur crashed into the ground with the force of an artillery shell, Deadshot yelled, "Get down," and tackled Psyche to the ground. Die. Boom. Bakugo crashed into the ground, tumbling to his feet as a villain wearing a bird mask charged at him, while the overpowered explosion over their heads sent the majority of them crashing to the ground from the concussive force. Only to have a buffed-up Kirishima block his punch, sending him sliding back with a grunt of pain. Bakugo snarled, "Fucking die already," and thrust both hands forward, sending Rappa hurtling into the mountainside with the twin explosion. Running back to them, Deadshot yelled, "You boys alright?" "Never better," Bakugo yelled, his hands crackling with tiny pops, while Kirishima debuffed next to him, panting. "Speak for yourself, I could barely hold it together," Kirishima gasped, "but that doesn't matter. They teleported Midoriya away." Deadshot insisted, "They did what?" Bakugo growled, his hands twitching as he saw Rappa get back up, and then grinning fiercely when the man grunted and fell back down. "Dropped him into a portal after he secured the kids," Bakugo said. "You boys help Psyche with the others, I'll go looking for Midoriya." Deadshot fled into the woods. "You had better be alive, youngster." Never one to sit back and watch a battle go to waste, Izuku had scored multiple hits on his opponent, her yukata had multiple tears and holes in it, and blood was slowly running down her arms and legs as she dodged Cheshire's blades, each one grazing armor or the skin between the metal plates. Cheshire brought her Tensen around in arc, but Izuku stabbed his knife through it and yanked it out of her hand. She threw it with deadly accuracy, the blades scratching her mask as she barely avoided it, and another sai appeared in her hand. They continued to slide between each other's attacks in an effort to end the fight quickly. She twirled in midair, easily dodging Izuku's thrown knife as she landed her feet and shot back at Izuku, sais sparking against knives as they traded blows. Izuku flipped back, knocking the sais aside with his gauntlets before delivering a powerful punch to her stomach, sending her tumbling back, rolling to her hands, and launching her H3 rupees 3 LF into the sky. As Cheshire landed on her feet and threw her sai, Izuku's fist suddenly lashed out with a grunt of exertion, catching her in the chin, breaking her mask and sending her flying back. Izuku then dove for his gun. Before the blade sank into his stomach in a space between his armor, Izuku had time to roll to his feet and raise his gun. When he realized who it was that actually threw the sai, the gun fell limp from his grasp. Izuku staggered back a little and whispered, "Mia?" as his recently resurrected love picked up his other gun and shot him 4 times in the chest. Izuku leapt for his dropped gun once more with a strangled cry, squeezed off 3 rounds, and made Mia flee for safety. Izuku rolled carelessly over a fallen tree to seek cover as she paced from tree to tree, taunting, "What's the matter, Izu? Seen a ghost?" He bit out, You bitch, you faked your own death?" It was the only way. Mia whirled down towards Izuku, who grabbed her leg and smashed her through a tree as he rolled to the side, barely escaping a hail of bullets as he returned fire. He growled, "I warned you, I loved you, was it all a lie?" he said as he fired his final rounds at her fleeing figure. All he could do was have a knife slam into his leg, and then a knee slammed into his helmet, breaking the faceplate and making him toss it off. Thud. Izuku looked down slowly, stunned to see one of his abandoned combat knives protruding between the gaps of his breastplate, and he let out a small, startled gasp. Mia said icily, "I did what I had to." She dodged a couple of Izuku's slower blows before kicking his other knee in and piercing him with her side just below the shoulder, causing him to collapse to his knees and gasp for air. As he attempted to stand but stumbled back against a tree, Mia walked slowly around him and produced a collapsible sword that came to life in her hand. "I'm not the weak little damsel you remember," she said, looking him in the eye. She raised the blade above her head and grasped the handle with both hands. Izuku mumbled, "Do it," as blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Mia lifted the blade slightly higher as her hand began to shake. He raised his head slightly to glare at her and muttered, "You're no longer a damsel." His lip curled slightly as he watched her eyes flicker doubtfully, then said, "Do it." Deadshot yelled, "No," as he rushed into the clearing, his wrist guns tearing the blade from Mia's grasp, causing her to leap back and duck between trees while Deadshot pursued. Izuku moaned as he sagged to the side, eventually losing consciousness due to his injuries. As he pursued Mia, Deadshot growled, You were dead." "Kurogiri," she yelled, causing a portal to open up behind her. She sneered and threw multiple knives at him, all of which he threw out of the air. The lead can do many things. Before Deadshot could do more than fire a few rounds into it, she fell backwards through it and it vanished. He snarled, "Damn it," and turned around, sprinting to Izuku's side. Kid, are you alright?" he demanded, shaking Izuku's shoulder and saying, "Come on kid, open your eyes." Izuku mumbled frantically, Mia, she's alive," before fainting. Deadshot's shoulders slumped, and he grunted as he started administering first aid. "God damn it. What the hell did we just step into, kid?" When Momo crashed through the lodge's front doors, the heroes rushed to the dilapidated structure where their classmates were quickly checking on their fallen peers. Most of them were unconscious, and some had deep cuts or twisted ankles from the fierce fighting outside. A medic hero was doing his best to heal what he could, much like Ojiro, who had lost consciousness during their frantic escape. He took Mina and Ojiro right away, while Shiozaki led Kaminari into a side room where the boy was deep fried. Eri yelled, "Momo," and slammed a tight hug into her chest. Momo gripped the girl tightly and sighed in relief, saying, "I'm glad you're okay." "Where's Midoriya?" she asked. Momo turned pale as Kota yelled, "A portal got him. I think one of the heroes went to go find him." "Momo." Uraraka yelled, hobbling over with a leg stab wound. "I'm glad you're here. Kirishima and Bakugo are guarding the back entrance, and Monoma is with Sue and Tokiyami watching the sides." Momo inquired anxiously, "Have you heard from Iida?" "There's a lot of people missing. We think Ragdoll and a few others got dropped on the other side of the forest," said Uraraka, shaking her head pitifully. "We need to organize search and rescue now that we have heroes here and our attackers have thinned." The medic assured her, the heroes are already out looking, and ushered her to sit with a confused-looking Kendo. "Relax, they might need you soon." While Uraraka knelt down by Kota, Momo sighed and picked up Eri, sitting next to the redhead. "What happened with you?" she asked Kendo. "We got dropped in the training fields," Kendo said in a raspy voice, but she persevered. "Yakuza attacked, we fought them off, then this mist came in, and suddenly people were dropping. Tetsu figured out what was going on and ran off. I don't know if he was trying to get out of it or going to go find the guy who made it. Knowing him, it was the latter." Harshly coughed, "I tried to follow, passed out not too long after, woke up here. What about you?" She trembled a little at this, but she composed herself as Eri whimpered a little, and she collapsed into mud. "We were dropped to the southeast. We took down a few parties searching for us before this crazy blonde girl attacked. She stabbed Mina and sliced Ojiro's face open. I shot her. A lot of the Yakuza guys were doing that here." Uraraka replied, "We think it was some kind of cloning quirk." Kendo concurred, "Encountered that too where we were. Makes sense. So not only do they have real attackers, but clones that can fight just like them." Momo was worried. "I hope Izuku is okay. How did he get captured?" Kirishima said a portal opened right under him while he was hiding behind him from a sniper. He couldn't save him before it happened. Uraraka added sorrowfully, "We don't know where they took him." "You must not give up hope." When the three girls looked up, Uraraka exclaimed, "Iida," before leaping to her feet and giving her friend a hug. "You're okay." "I arrived at the training fields a few minutes before the gas dissipated, didn't get too much inhalation, but I was hit a few times. I was sent back to make sure we're defended here," he assured, despite the gauze covering his arm and the rasp in his voice. Doc nodded to himself and said, "As well as can be." He checked his field dressing before continuing, "You may as well stay here, should be winding down." He stopped as he appeared to stiffen, letting out a soft gasp. When the healing hero collapsed and a girl in a green yukata appeared, blood streaming down her hands as she withdrew the knife from his back, Uraraka gasped and said, "Sir? Give me the girl." And had to quickly duck out of the way when two barrels protruded from Momo's back, launching a barrage of automatic fire. Uraraka yelled, "Momo! Get Eri out of here," before lunging towards Cheshire and defeating her with a yell of gunhead martial arts. As Momo fled down the hall with Kendo and Kota in tow, Iida was at her side right away, attempting to hold the assassin in check. Cheshire snarled as her ankle erupted, revealing a blade that emerged from a secret compartment in her heel. Before she could escape Uraraka's grasp, she stabbed Iida in the side with her fingers, sending her crashing to the ground, choking, spinning on her hip. She then wrapped her legs around Iida's neck, twisting him into and through the wall and into unconsciousness before she leapt back up and ran down the hall after Momo and Kendo. Cheshire barely managed to avoid the blow as Kendo was waiting with a strong right straight that ripped through part of the hull. He stabbed Kendo 3 times in the side before finishing with a quick stab to the side of her neck, which caused the redhead to crumple and wrap a hand around the wound. After kicking a nearby door and yelling, "You're making me kill your friends," she was instantly struck in the jaw with a steel pipe. Momo yelled, "You'll pay for that," as she threw Cheshire to the ground while wearing newly made quirk suppression cuffs around one arm. She must have been shocked when Cheshire managed to get back up and give her a strong front kick to the chest, which caused her to crash into the wall. She threw the knife at the bewildered heiress, taunting, "These things don't work on me, princess." After avoiding the knife, Momo sprang back up and charged at Cheshire, who mockingly extended her arms in a challenge for a blow. When Momo swept her legs out from under her, something grabbed onto her side, a tiny booster suddenly triggered, and she was flung towards the wall. Momo did exactly that, diving past the girl at the last second and letting a flashbang explode in her face, causing her to cry out in surprise and rub her eyes. The two girls struggled for a while until Cheshire attempted to headbutt Momo, yelling in agony as a plate of steel emerged from the girl's forehead. Momo then slammed her own forehead into the girl's nose with a sickening crack after Cheshire got her feet under her and kicked off the wall, pulling another knife from somewhere on her belt and twirling it while popping her nose back into place. She made Cheshire fall back and sneered, "You have my attention, princess." Momo clenched her fists, revealing electrified brass knuckles. "Come get some, bitch," she growled as she moved closer to the girl, avoiding the knife's initial jabs and swipes and delivering her own ferocious punches and kicks, each of which narrowly missed the girl. When Cheshire's jab caused the girl to stutter for a moment, allowing her to drag her blade across her stomach, the girl cried out as a shallow cut drew blood. Cheshire smiled and taunted, "Aren't you worried about your little friend Izu? What did you do to him?" she demanded, attacking again, and when she went for a hard knee to the gut, a beanbag gun formed in her knee, blasting the assassin point blank in the stomach. That was 50,000 volts, the equivalent of a stun gun, Momo growled, advancing on the girl, trying to hide how drawn out she was, pushing her limit in this fight. "Imagine what'll happen when I ramp them up to 100,000. As she strode into the room, Shiozaki said icily, "Your sins are many." Her intervention allowed Momo to knock her out with a hard, electrified uppercut. Suddenly, a cord of vines shot out, wrapping around Cheshire's neck and hauling her up. Shiozaki apologized and said, "I came as soon as I could after hearing fighting while assisting Kaminari. You did a fantastic job, but we must assist our friends." Momo secured Cheshire with 3 pairs of handcuffs before rushing to Kendo's side. The girl was still awake, clutching the wound in her neck, her side bleeding sluggishly. Momo immediately created a medkit. "Kendo, stay awake." "I think she missed my carotid," Kendo muttered shakily, "but I'm okay." Shiozaki, who was kneeling by her friend in concern, reminded her, "She also hit you in the side. Let us help you." Kendo croaked, "Uraraka, Iida, out." They were trying to restrain the assassin in the other room. "Shiozaki, please go check on them." The pro-hero medic was also injured. Shiozaki nodded and gave her class president's hand a comforting squeeze before leaving, saying, "I shall bring them here." Momo whispered to her, "You're lucky. It seems like she missed anything important." "Hurt like a bitch still." When medic staggered out of the room with his left leg dragging slightly, Momo laughed and looked up in relief. "Is she stable?" He sat by Momo's anxious hand and practically fell into place next to her, demanding to know. As the man raised bloodied hands to cover Kendo's 2 wounds, Momo told him, "You need to rest. She's not in danger of dying, but she's definitely lost a lot of blood." Kendo gasped as her wounds partially healed, the skin still an angry red, and scabs were still covering the worst of the wounds, but she was better off than she had been before. "After this," he protested, his hands glowing. Medic exhaled, leaning back against the wall, "But that should help. Recovery girl will be able to take care of it." Kendo said, "Thank you," and then he passed out. "Yamomo." As Eri ran into her arms again, Momo turned to face her and smiled slightly. "You're safe," Momo said, glancing at the still unconscious assassin. "I'm grateful Shiozaki came when she did. I was running on fumes." Trying to keep his eyes open, Medic whispered, "Your fighting style is a lot more fluid than it was at the sports festival." "Fat Gum's influence," Momo said, smiling softly. "I'm really hoping to be able to do my work study with him." Medic chuckled feebly and winced as death arms exploded through a nearby door, saying, "He's one of the best." "What took place? Is everyone doing okay?" With a wild glance around, the strength hero asked. Medic said tiredly, "We need to start evacuating before more show up. Kids captured an assassin." Looking over as Uraraka and Shiozaki assisted Eid out into the hall, Death Arms remarked angrily, "Ems is 5 minutes out, I can hear the sirens now. We can evacuate when they have an escort to UA." The medic muttered, "Good. I'm going to faint now." After standing up slowly, Momo went to her friend's side and said, "We need to start getting the injured ready for transportation." Uraraka grinned wearily and croaked, "Yao Momo, just lead the way. You're in charge until Izuku returns." She worried and reassured Eri, saying, "Hopefully it's soon. Let's start preparing for the worst injured to be carried out first." Right. When Deadshot eventually pulled Izuku into the front of the lodge, he grunted. Heroes were patrolling the area, calling for assistance as dozens of police cars, fire trucks, and EMS rigs were parked outside, their emergency lights flashing. As he approached, he yelled, "He's hurt." Deadshot. Running over with 2 paramedics, Psyche called, "What happened?" After the paramedics hurried the unconscious boy away on a gurney, the older man removed his helmet and said grimly, raking his hand through his hair, "Had I been just a second slow." "Assassin? A woman?" Rin gave him a stern look when Psyche asked. "She attacked the lodge, attempted to kidnap the child, and nearly killed a pro-hero and 3 hit students before being defeated by Shiozaki Ibara and Yayorozu Momo." He cursed, "Son of a bitch. Is she under lockdown? Is someone watching over her?" "Why, of course. What's happening, Rin?" As he observed a number of students swarming anxiously around the injured Izuku, he said grimly, "Nothing good." As Izuku crept silently up the fire escape to their apartment complex's roof, he whispered, "Mia?" Mia was sitting against one of the big air conditioners that were fastened in the center of the otherwise bare roof. As he silently sat next to her and brought her in for an embrace, which she gladly accepted, she muttered, "Hey Izu." "Who was it?" Izuku asked. She came back with, "You gonna go fight them?" "Who was it?" She urged, "Are you gonna fight them?" Which caused Izuku to sigh. He said, "I'll just give them a scare." Mia nodded her head, "You're trying to be a hero. You can't get into any more fights without them blacklisting you. I'll handle it, I promise." "If they do it again," Izuku sighed. She interrupted him with a playful nose flick, causing him to snort, saying, "I'm a big girl, I can take care of myself. You won't do anything." For a few silent moments, they both gazed up at the stars while Izuku embraced her tightly to reassure her that he understood. "No matter what I do," Mia whispered to him, "you'll always love me, right?" "Of course," he said, beaming broadly, "I swear to you, Mia, I'll always be by your side." As he felt himself being carried through 2 white, familiar corridors, the lights were blinding and flashed in and out of his vision. His vision grew darker and darker, and he could hear a chorus of voices everywhere. Multiple deep lacerations to the chest, gunshot wounds. Damage to his liver, "We may have to, it's been an hour, we must move. We urgently need defibs because he is about to go into cardiac arrest." Izuku's eyes slowly opened after the shock, and he recognized the nurses and doctors around him. "Where, what," he tried to say, but a mask was quickly placed over his mouth, making breathing a little easier. Then he started coughing, and he could feel the moisture trickling down his throat and chin. "He has blood in his lungs, shit, he has to go to surgery right away." Izuku allowed himself to be dragged into the darkness, but this time he wasn't rudely dragged out. "I promise, Mia." Momo was reminded of what had happened at USJ when she looked at Izuku through the doorway of his hospital room. He was not awake and was attempting to get out of bed while restraining the nurses from going to see someone about a new arm. He had tubes in his mouth and nose to help him breathe and eat, and his chest was covered in gauze that was starting to turn pink. He was too still, and even his chest barely rose with each short breath. If they had all been a little quicker, if she had reacted a fraction of a second sooner to escape the portal, or if she had gone ahead of the injured to try and link up faster, perhaps she could have been there when Izuku was taken, when he was forced to fight that crazy witch, and perhaps they could have stopped her together. She wanted to walk in fully, to sit by his bedside and hold his hand, but she stayed back. In an attempt to shake off the negative thoughts, Momo sighed and shook her head. "Thinking like that's gonna eat you up from the inside." When Momo noticed Rin with his mask off and his guns holstered, she turned to look at him and said, "How do you know what I'm thinking?" She whispered. "Because I've also considered it. However, none of you could have done anything, and your teachers are to blame for that." They were aware? Momo looked at Rin sharply and whispered in shock. Indeed, they were aware enough to summon reinforcements based on Izuku's testimony and a suspicious blood trail, but not much else. He shook his head, saying, they came in with more muscle and more men than was even conceivable. We didn't expect the League of Villains to be this coordinated, nor did we think they'd team up with the Shihesaikai. And they decided not to tell any of you to make sure no one panicked. Momo, still angry that they hadn't been given important information, agreed sourly that there hasn't been that big a movement of villains since the USJ. It hurt even more that Izuku hadn't spoken up, and before the USJ it had been what, 6 years? The Kyoto Ward incident, yes. Rin gave a grave nod, we miscalculated, and we paid for it. The majority of the classes are dealing with smoke inhalation and unconsciousness, those at least 6 injured, including Midoriya, we failed. With her arms crossed, Momo whispered, and Midoriya knew, while turning to face her boyfriend. From what Aizawa said, he was furious about their decisions, they bade him have faith in them. And look where that got him. What do you think would have happened if they had told you? Rin shook his head. Any change in the class's behavior could have been an invitation to attack. If there had been no attack throughout the day, everyone would have been in the same position out of fear of being found. Dropping the guards across the forest. We could have installed guards that rotated, kept an eye out for anything suspicious, and we were doing fine with that when it was just Midoriya, she retorted. Why didn't you see them before they set the trap, then? Why didn't you notice villains watching you for the past couple days? He asked, forcing her to stop. Or the way Izuku behaved today. I'll give you that you're good kids, but you're still just kids, and that's our fault because you shouldn't have been in this predicament in the first place. Don't think for a moment, however, that we didn't struggle with what to do, how to do it, and how quickly we would do it. Making difficult decisions is a big part of this job, and regrettably, the last one was the best-worst scenario. With her head lowered and her shoulders slumped, Momo leaned back against the wall and whispered, we could have done something. She shed a tear. Midoriya isn't waking up anytime soon, he said gently, and Rin sighed, head home. What updates have you received regarding his health? She asked softly as she wiped away her tears. Rin's head bowed and her blood went cold. The gunshots he took, the stabbings, he's looking at extensive trauma. Internal bleeding is still a problem. They'll be taking him into surgery soon. They don't think he'll have more than 40% movement. His career is potentially dead in the water. Oh, Rin growled and shook his head angrily, saying, I'll be making sure they don't get to end anyone else's careers. He put his all into this and it was stolen by these damn villains. Momo gave him a silent farewell with a numb nod before leaving. Izuku not becoming a hero? She thought, distressed, stopping by the stairs, her hands clasped tightly to her chest, whispering, more tears streaming down her face, it's not fair, he deserves more than this he deserves my help. Her voice was suddenly filled with conviction as she hurried to the stairs. Her body ached. The broken, bloodied nose, bruised chest and stomach, and taser burns were evidence that the Yaoyorozu heiress had been more difficult than she had anticipated. As she rolled her stiff neck and felt consciousness slowly creep in over the darkness, she moaned and spat a glob of blood onto the concrete interrogation room floor. She was holding herself tightly in the metal chair with handcuffs, and she attempted to kick the table in front of her, but it was bolted down, and her foot hurt from the effort. A detective in a trench coat entered through a door to her right and said, Good morning. He smiled sardonically and said, You've been out for a while. Mia ignored the detective and glared straight ahead without saying anything. A smiling photo from her middle school years stared back at her as he slammed a file onto the table and spread its contents out in front of her. That's okay. You don't have to talk, just listen. He started by saying, Mia Watanabe. She was, aged 15, almost 16, believed dead for over a year. Surviving relatives, a sister, 12, a grandmother, both of whom really want to talk with you, and an uncle, former number 2 hero Deadshot. He watched her closely as she gazed down at the file, her eyes vacant, not a single twitch showing any kind of emotion. I've been wondering what would cause a 14-year-old to fake her death, only to reveal herself a year later as a villain. Tsukachi paused in his thoughts as she said, I didn't mean to reveal my face. Izuku got a lucky shot, knocked my mask off. Tsukachi questioned, and why were you targeting your ex-boyfriend? He became tense when Mia gave him a knowing, mocking smile. Who said I was targeting him? He asked. You had him transported away from the main fighting and faced him yourself, seems like targeting. He was a threat, nothing more nothing less. If I hadn't done that he would have more than likely beat me with the help of his brick wall. Leaning back, Tsukachi asked, so who was your target? I think we both know the answer to that, detective. She exhaled deeply, nothing personal, she's very special to certain parties. He pushed, the she Hesaikai. Innocently, she drew lead, them, and others. You know, it could go a long way for your charges if you cooperate, Sukachi said, fighting the urge to frown. What do I care about that? She inquired with genuine interest. I assaulted several UA students, and if my hunch is correct, dear Izu isn't out of the woods yet. Murder would look amazing on my resume. Sukachi interrupted her angrily, saying, this is serious. I don't think I care about it, especially since by the end of tonight, I'll vanish with that little girl, never to be seen again. Like the Cheshire Cat. So am I, she sneered. Do you think the threat of charges is really going to affect someone who showed up to kill your precious students? With her file in front of her, Sukachi got up and said, good luck. You're in the center of Hero Association headquarters. When he said, there's no give in her stance, no remorse, he strode out of the room and entered the viewing room, where Aizawa was standing with All Might and Nezu. Let me know if Cheshire wants a magazine or something. What could make someone so young become a villain? All Might mumbled. A lot. Aizawa was grumbling, looking in there. I see what Midoriya could have been if he didn't have the heart he did. The quirkless are never treated very well, and this is the product of those who won't stand for it any longer. She's not fighting for injustice, Toshinori claimed. From the sounds of it, she's become a hitman. Unsurprising. Nezu thought as she jumped onto the table to get a better view of her. In this world, many who are subjugated eventually grow to believe power is everything, that there's no reason to save the weak when no one saved them when they were at their lowest. This mentality most likely drove her to a profession where she's in control, powerful, and uninterested in helping others like her find the same. Is there a remote possibility that she might get away? If she leaves, Eri won't be the only danger, Aizawa inquired. Now, where is she? Toshi inquired anxiously. At the hospital with Midoriya's mother. Aizawa replied. They have a small army of heroes guarding them, including Fatgum. He's the best to hand mercenaries like Cheshire here. Still, we should send a squad of officers as well, just in case. Sukachi continued, it's a gut feeling, but just to be safe. Nezu turned away from the window and said, agreed. After all, there was a raid to organize, so we should start moving. Mia smirked as she spat a thin piece of one of her restrained hands, but no one saw her do it as they had all planned. Kenji Yaoyorozu left his family's private laboratory with a yawn. Since his sister Momo's school trip, he had been there. His parents were on a business trip abroad, so he had the opportunity to spend as much time alone as he wanted in the lab. This was the first time he had been left alone since before his younger sister was born. He was now making his way to the kitchen with the intention of devouring his leftover pizza before dozing off for 3 days. The ideal amount of time to rest before his sister gets home. His sister ran in, looking as though she had seen better days. Her hair was out of its typical ponytail, she was covered in dirt and grime, and there were specks of blood. Was that blood? When the front door exploded open as he entered the foyer. He started to say, Momo. What? But he yelled when she took hold of his arm and pulled him back toward the lab. As they went, her brother stumbling to keep up, she said firmly, I need your help. Finally planting his feet to stop her oppressive gait, he demanded to know, what's going on, Momo? Why is there blood on your shirt? Momo yelled at him, what's going, do you not know what happened last night? I let the maids and butlers go home for the week. I sure as hell didn't need them while I was in the lab, which I've been in for 3 days straight, so I'm way out of touch, he said defensively, holding his hands up in a calm manner. Momo moaned, they're saying his hero career is over. She went on to explain, Izuku was injured, they're saying. Her voice cracked slightly, our summer camp was attacked. As he embraced her, he felt her nod against his shoulder and slump slightly in his arms. I'm sorry, that's your boyfriend, right? He said. Life sucks, but there's not much you can do to help. Come on, let's go make some cocoa and get you to bed. No, Momo firmly pushed him away and said, you can help him, but I can't. Surprised, I said, me? What can I? Oh no, Momo pleaded, please Kenji. His future depends on this. He shook his head and said, no, absolutely not. Nah. Momo, that has a 15% chance of killing the recipient. Momo shot back angrily, that leaves an 85% chance it works. It's a Hail Mary, there's no guarantee it'll heal his wounds, it's a serum for boosting the physical body, not a cure-all. It's a chance we have to take, please Kenji. No, it can't be done, not unless you know a way to pump 1.3 million volts into his body to complete. Kenji paused, groping and running a hand through his hair as he felt how greasy it was. He stopped when he noticed Momo grinning, oh no. Kaminari woke up with a groan, glanced blearily up at Jiru's unconscious body on the hospital bed, then glared at his ringing phone and said, "Hello?" without checking the caller ID. "Thank God I've been calling for 15 minutes, Kaminari," Momo exclaimed with relief. "Sorry, I was sleeping." Kaminari yawned, looking at Jiru once more. "What's up? How quickly are you able to reach the hospital?" she inquired. He sheepishly admitted, "I've been keeping an eye on Jiru until her parents return to town. I'm already here." "Excellent. In 10 minutes, come see me at Izuku's room. I need your assistance." He nodded slowly and said, okay." He stood up and walked to the door, sighing when he realized she had hung up. "Just once I'd like people to clue me in fully." As he unlocked Cheshire's interrogation room, Sukachi nodded to the 3 other officers and said sternly, "Okay, Cheshire, you're being moved to county." The uniformed officers entered, one on each side and one covering the door as Sukachi entered. To uncuff her, he walked around the table. As she slipped beneath the table and slammed into the stunned officer, elbow driving hard into his Adam's apple, collapsing his throat and sending him to the ground choking as 3 razor-thin needles appeared in her clenched fist. Only her hands came up unrestrained to grab him by the head and flip him over her head and onto the table, kicking the chair out and into the officer on the left. They stabbed into the officer on the far right after a fast spin. Both Sukachi and the last officer had recovered from her initial attack and had their guns raised and trained on her when she rushed towards the door before he had even fallen to the ground in a pool of his own blood. Quick enough to seize the officer and drag him roughly into the line of fire, she commanded Sukachi to move. As she inserted those same needles into the man's shoulder, causing him to scream in agony, Sukachi had to ease his finger off the trigger. "Shoot this bitch," the officer growled, yelling once more as she pushed the delicate metal fragments farther into the bone. She made fun of him by saying, "It's not polite to call an underage girl names." Starting with, "Also not right to torture a man," Sukachi began. Sukachi flinched as she inserted the needles into the officer's bone again, causing another agonized cry. All right, she yelled, retreated slowly, holding the gun high as she moved forward, pushing the officer in front of her, keeping her body fully concealed by her meat shield, and looking back as she entered the hallway, which had few offices and no officers, but in front of her was a small group of SWAT-clad men pointing tactical rifles at her meat shield. When they got a shot, they were all prepared and waiting to bombard her with rounds. With his gun slightly lowered but prepared to rise, Sukachi yelled, "There's nowhere left to go, surrender." She growled and pushed the man toward his fellows, leaving the needles in his shoulder as she turned and ran. As bullets tore through the air where she had just been standing, she rolled to her feet and started at a dead sprint for a nearby window, hurling herself through it as the sound of gunfire filled the air again. Not a choice. Before they even made it to the window, she was gone. Gazing out of the 4th-story window from which Cheshire had thrown herself, the gloomy detective said into his radio, "This is Detective Sukachi. Cheshire has escaped. Priority Alpha for all heroes in the immediate area. I repeat, Cheshire has escaped." At the moment, Inko was unsure of how to feel. Her son was dying a few rooms away, and machines were breathing for him. The little girl he had grown to love as a daughter was pressed against his side, crying uncontrollably, and he had to go get her after she had sobbed herself to sleep. The man across the table from her is the only reason she wasn't in there, even though she should have been there. There was no doubting who the man in front of her was, even though she noticed that he had put on a little weight, had thicker arms than she remembered, and had shaved his curly brown hair at one point. "What do you want, Hisashi?" she asked, her face a blank mask in front of her ex-husband, who had been called in when he claimed to be her ex and had been stopped by security when he had attempted to request Izuku's room. The man hadn't even looked at her since she had entered. Instead, he had been staring at the floor with his hands clasped together and his elbows on his knees. His leg was bouncing nervously as he looked up, his light green eyes glimmering. "How is he?" The venom now caught at the end of her sentence before she could catch herself, and she scoffed, "Do you even care?" Inko saw guilt flash through Sashi's eyes and felt a tiny sense of satisfaction as he flinched. He started, "I know I messed up." "That's an understatement." Hisashi pushed through her mocking snort and uttered, "But I am still his father. They called me the first time he got injured and I couldn't get a flight. You ignored my calls." "Of course I did," she replied strongly. 11 years, Hisashi, 11 years of empty promises and ignoring your son, and suddenly you want to play the part of the concerned parent?" Hisashi attempted to defend himself by saying, "I have always loved Izuku." "Was it love that made you take the job in California?" she asked coldly, causing him to flinch once more. Was it love when you stopped taking his calls when he was 7? Or how about when you only sent postcards for his birthday? Maybe it was love when you sent me divorce papers 3 years ago. Hisashi appeared to sag with every reminder. He bowed his head again and said feebly, "He's my son." Standing and turning to face the door, she snarled, "No, he's not. You hardly know him. Guilt brought you here, and I'm not about to ease it. Inko, please." As she clicked the door shut firmly, she said, "Goodbye, Hisashi." Hisashi ran a hand over his buzzed head and blew out a short puff of fire breath in frustration. The sharp pain in his heart reminded him that it was his fault, no matter how many times he tried to convince himself otherwise. After working in America for a few months, he had become anxious upon learning that his son had no peculiarities. When his wife called him crying, he found an excuse to end the call early. He went to a bar without speaking to his son or comforting his wife. After that, he made a lot of mistakes, some of which are still bothering him, like not staying in touch with his former family more. "Guess I'm not welcome anymore?" he asked dryly as he got up and left, the two heroes at the door giving him suspicious looks. As he nodded to Death Arms flanking his sides, the hero he recognized as Saiki said, "Not currently." They then led him to the front doors, where a crowd of news media and paparazzi sat camped, many of them shouting questions as soon as the heroes appeared, pressing against the police line that held them back with shouts of authority and outstretched arms. Hisashi tapped a pack of cigarettes in his pocket and said, "I'm breaking the law if I stand outside, right?" It was just another poor choice he had made over the years. "Knock yourself out." Death Arms walked to the side alley next to him and took out his own pack as Saiki Safe strolled back into the hospital with a pleasant demeanor. He asked aloud, "Using this as a reason to keep an eye on me?" As he leaned against the wall and looked at the paparazzi as they left to pursue other heroes who were arriving and departing. A tiny tongue of flame ignited the tip of his tongue. Death Arms sneered, lighting his own with a battered Zippo. "Nah, it's my break." "So, you're Ghost's old man, huh?" he asked. He sighed and said, "Yep, that's me, deadbeat extraordinaire. Made some bad choices, huh? I can relate." Death Arms sighed. "Ex-wife wouldn't let me see my daughter for the first 10 years of her life. This is the first year I actually got to see her outside of postcards and photos." Staring at the cigarette's cherry, Hisashi muttered, "Yeah, only it's my own fault I haven't seen my son. I don't blame his mother for not letting me see him. Doesn't mean I like it, mind you. But I don't blame her." "If you want," Death Arms said, flicking out his cigarette, "I can let you in after visiting hours. Inko Midoriya will still be on the premises, but the doctors gave her a private room a floor down so she can be close by." Death Arms nodded, and they smoked in silence for a short while. He asked, "And why would you do that for me? Because I know how bad your son's condition is." Death Arms replied with seriousness, "Much as you can blame yourself. I can't, in good conscience, just let you go knowing." With a knot in his throat, Hisashi nodded, understanding exactly what Death Arms had not mentioned. When's visitation over? Before the media could question him for information, Death Arms returned inside and Hisashi walked past the police line and into the crowd. "A few hours, meet me in the alley around 8, I'll get you in." After sneaking into a partially destroyed warehouse and scanning the area suspiciously, Mia spun around and grabbed a knife that had been thrown at her head. From the shadows a sneering, patronizing voice said, "Cheshire, you failed." As an aristocratic man walked out, she stoically said, "The Ua brats were better than I gave them credit for." He appeared to have a timeless face, young yet old, with raven hair growing in a high widow's peak and silver streaking through the silky locks. His cold, dark eyes regarded her with admiration as he appeared to circle her. "You hesitated." When he laughed, Mia looked down and said, "Deadshot took me by surprise," without flinching or showing any emotion. "That's not what I'm talking about, child," he said softly, his voice sounding more fatherly as he walked up to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. She flinched this time, which made the man smile. "You must be able to let go of your old life. You cannot let your emotions get the better of you." "I have," she uttered firmly. "So why did you not murder the ghost?" Her shoulders drooped as he asked. "You had plenty of opportunity. However, you paused and let Deadshot save him. He'll die from his injuries." He laughed and stepped back, saying, "How inelegant. No, the contract remains unfinished. You will finish what you started tonight. You will kill Ghost, and you will recover the asset." He clapped, and 8 shadowy ninjas materialized around him, one of whom gave him a Cheshire mask. "Failure means stricter training. Cheshire, don't let me down." She took the Cheshire Cat's mask and put it on again, bowing and saying, "Yes, Exalted One." As their chief of security spoke with Psyche, Momo hurried to keep up with Kenji Yaoyorozu as he pushed a heavy cart through the hospital's front doors, with police and their own security personnel keeping the crowd away from the big van he had pulled up in. "Pardon me. What's this about?" a nurse began, stopping in shock as Kenji stepped around his cart, the top shelf platform quietly and cheerfully continuing on as Kenji shot his hand out with a charismatic smile. "Doctor, a pleasure, a great pleasure, ma'am. Kenji Yaoyorozu. I'm happy to work with you." She spluttered, working, and watched bewildered as Momo took over pushing the cart. Kenji then entered her field of vision, enthusiastically shaking her hand while placing his other arm around her shoulder. "Certainly, I was called in by the hospital's head himself. After all, we cannot allow this hero to remain down. Don't worry, he's in good hands, and I'll make sure my assistant keeps track of his vitals for you," he declared as he led her back to the nurse's station. As he reseated her in her chair, the nurse attempted to say, but. "Thank you for your service. Good night. We have it from here." Kenji was gone after that, returning to his sister's side as they went into the elevator, his fingers drumming uneasily beside him. Before the woman could leave her chair, the door closed, and his sister laughed. "That was smooth." He ran a hand through his hair and muttered, "Shut up, you don't get to find that funny. You do realize that what we're doing is completely illegal, don't you? The fun is there, isn't it? How many times did Mom and Dad have to ease relations with the government again?" Momo shot back, rolling his eyes. "You create one nuclear reactor with some shady plutonium and suddenly you're branded a bad guy for life," he grumbled as the door opened and they moved forward. "If it hasn't escaped your notice, dearest sister, I haven't been hounded by government agents in 9 years. Would be 10 tomorrow if I wasn't sure we weren't headed for an up after this." "I promise Kenji I will take full responsibility," she said. "That's what you said about Mum's broken snow globe collection." In frustration, Momo moaned, "Kanji, please." "I'm kidding," he said lightly, a strange smile beginning to appear on his face as his entire mood completely changed. "To be honest, I'm a little excited," he said, acknowledging that animal trials are necessary but completely pointless when dealing with issues like this. "I'm eager to observe what it does." "Have you taken your medication?" she asked, suddenly a lot more wary as the elevator opened, neither paying attention to Death Arm's confused "Hey," as they pushed past him. He let out an almost insane cackle as he arrived at Midoriya's door. Startled to see no one there, he kicked it open and exclaimed, "Of course not, I've been in the lab for 3 days," and froze when he noticed a man sitting next to Izuku's bed, suspiciously staring up with misty brown eyes. With smoke leaking from his nostrils, he stood up and demanded to know, "What are you doing here?" but was abruptly interrupted when Kenji bounded forward again. He enthusiastically wrung the man's hand and exclaimed, "Kenji Yaoyorozu, a pleasure to meet you, sir. I was called in to help your son, or who I'm assuming is your son. Are you his father?" he asked as Momo started to arrange the items she could. The man looked between the two with a healthy dose of caution and said carefully, "I'm his father, yes." As he started to connect IVs and set up focal points for the necessary static discharge, he hurried to his sister's side and said, "It would help immensely if you gave permission, but this is happening with or without your consent, so I guess you should figure out where your morality lays within the next 5 minutes. Because my morality is fairly loose." "Fear not, we're here to help him." Momo yelled, "Kenji," which caused the slightly older man to smile at her. "This is your fault for making it an emergency, so deal with my lack of sleep and medication." Hisashi glared at the two and yelled, "Hold on, what are you doing?" Kenji smiled at him and pulled his goggles down from their spot in his air, snapping them into place over his eyes. "But I'm sure you'd rather give it some thought before we're using a potent physical enhancer, designed to increase strength, speed, brain processing power, and more importantly here boost one's natural healing factor. Not much, mind you, but in the initial charge we should be able to get everything healed, or it'll push him over the edge into death's sweet embrace. From a pure, scientific standpoint, I think it's worth the risk. I should arrest both of you right now." Suddenly, Momo and Kenji turned to face Death Arms, who had trailed them into the room. "This kind of drug is extremely controlled. Using it without permission." Almost instantly, Hisashi said, "I give permission." Death Arms gave him a stern look. As he retrieved a metal briefcase from the cart's bottom shelf and punched in an 18-digit code, Kenji exclaimed, "Excellent." His smile grew as the briefcase opened with a faint hiss, revealing 4 vials filled with blue liquid and 4 syringes to administer the liquid. Kaminari staggered past Death Arms, who began, "That's not how this," before being shoved into the room. He looked around anxiously and rambled, "Sorry I'm late, what's with the Frankenstein get up?" he asked. As he seized the electric user and dragged him to two metal hand clamps that were wired to each focal point, Kenji exclaimed, "Never you mind that, Igor. Just be ready to pump 500,000 joules into those bad boys in 5-second intervals for the next 15 to 30 minutes when I tell you to start, ending in a final big charge of 1.3 million. As he dropped the clamps, Kaminari yelled, "Hold on, what the hell is going on?" Everyone stared at Kenji in shock as he made a serious demand. "We are about to put a less than questionable drug into your close-to-death friend so that we can attempt to bring him back to life through scientific jargon and guesswork, you in?" Picking up the clamps, Kaminari said, "I just wanted you to know that my biggest fear in life is killing someone with my electricity, all right?" Kenji yelled, "I'll pay for your therapy, get ready Igor. I guess I'm already complicit in letting Hisashi in here, so might as well go for broke, right? If you can save him, great, if not, we'll all be going to jail." Death Arms moaned as he made his way back to the door. The insane doctor moaned a little as Momo gave Hisashi a stern look. "Glad you have such trust in us." Momo insisted, "Why would it be illegal for you to be here?" Not looking at anyone, Hisashi grimaced slightly and complained, "I might not, technically be his legal guardian anymore. But he's my son, I wanted to see him." Momo squinted and said, "Kenji, make sure everything's ready. Technically that's your job, now." Her brother cheered, "Righty-o," and ushered Kaminari to start reviewing his work. He has never discussed his father. Hisashi winced at that, avoiding Momo's accusing gaze. "I assume you're one of his pals?" he whispered. "Why are you here?" she said stiffly, "I'm his girlfriend." With a strained sigh, Hisashi said, "Look," raising his hands in a conciliatory motion, "I know I've messed up in life, but he is my son." Her glowing palm made Hisashi tense as he realized she was using her quirk. "That doesn't matter if you haven't been there for him," she countered in an aggressive whisper, "and he hasn't said anything about you. And I know, what I did was wrong, but I'm here trying to help now, please. Let me try and right some wrongs." Hisashi interrupted, causing her to jump a little. "I abandoned him." Momo hesitated because she didn't know him and Izuku hadn't ever spoken well of him, even when he had brought up his father, usually in reference to Eri. But then she met him and saw the regret and guilt in such familiar eyes, and she sighed in frustration. "I won't make you leave," she said calmly, "but you need to give us some space to work." Hisashi retreated to his chair and affirmed, "I won't get in the way. You know he won't like it that you're here." After a moment of contemplation, he nodded glumly and left the room, saying, "So long as he's alive to tell me that, I don't care." Why the Yaoyorozu girl was here and why her security detail had taken over the main lobby was a mystery to Saiki. He wasn't a whiner, though. Particularly if she was here to assist Ghost and his suspicion was right. He owed the child everything because he had saved his life. He therefore approved of whatever the Yaoyorozu girl did as long as it benefited the boy. "You look deep in thought." Saiki turned to face the Yaoyorozu family's head of security, a former hero who chose private security following a near-fatal injury. Formerly known as the pro-hero Hydro, Ken Takashimi was an elderly man with long black hair that was tied back in a low ponytail and streaked with silver. His fitted suit concealed the runner's body and battle-tuned muscles. Despite their hardness, his dark blue eyes revealed a level of understanding that only a fellow hero could see. Saiki sighed and shook his head, saying, "After everything he's been through, it just isn't fair to think about the kid up there, fighting for his life." Ken gave a nod. "I know what you mean," he stated, staring at the front doors. "The young Ms. Yaoyorozu has taken quite a shine to him. I myself haven't dealt with him near enough to form an opinion, but if she's willing to go to such lengths to help him, then he must be quite a young man. He's got a bright future and a great career ahead of him if he could just—" Saiki laughed and said, "That he is. The first time I met him was in Hosu. He saved my life after we ran into a Nomu. He's got a bright future and a great career ahead of him if he could just—" Saiki stopped as an explosion rocked the hospital. Smoke and fire spewed into the air outside, and the reporters fled. As Ken moved forward, some of his men fell in behind him, while others took up defensive positions by the stairs and the now locked-down elevators. "Lock down the elevators," Saiki commanded. A number of canisters flew through the air, thick gray smoke erupting from their ends before they even touched the ground, shattering the windows. Ken yelled, "Ari!" A shorter man moved forward, inhaled deeply, and then let out a sharp exhale. All of the smoke was blown back out of the hospital by a strong wind, which created a dense fog over the streets that appeared to be deserted. Ken yelled, "Get ready," and threw off his suit jacket to show off multiple water canisters. Two drained entirely with a flick of his wrist, leaving him with whip-like projections growing on his hands. Steel hands clenched into fists. Spikes emerged from another's back, and steel blades slid out from between a third's knuckles as his men all started to activate their quirks. Lightweight darts were being drawn out of Ari's pocket, thrown into the air, and allowed to be carried about by the wind he controlled. Get the staff somewhere safe. Psyche hurried to stand with the security detail, Smile Man, and Fat Gum as they ran out of the break room. Keep them contained to the lobby. Don't let them get to Ghost, Fat Gum yelled at the escaping nurses, cracking his knuckles. Wind whipped through the air as Ari's trick redirected the shuriken into the walls, causing the smoke to swirl as a flurry of them came flying in. Then, wearing dark robes and masks and brandishing a variety of sharp weapons, a number of shadowy figures charged into the lobby. The assassins wasted no time in making a lunge for the heroes, but they were forced to retreat when the Yayorozu guard launched an attack. As Fatgum shielded a sobbing nurse from the indiscriminate attack of a massive assassin, he commanded her to get out of here. As he launched the assassin's fist back, sending the man tumbling into the melee, with Ken's water whip wrapping around his neck and sending him flying back out of the hospital. Soon, the lobby was filled with fighting pairs, steel crashing against steel and fists sinking into flesh. As they struggled with Smile Man and the steel-knuckled guard, X-Les was shooting red beams of energy from his eye, piercing the odd assassin. Psyche, to his right, was throwing glass and rubble at any available opening, forcing him to roll away as three of the villains in dark clothing lunged at him, each brandishing a different bladed weapon. He knew he wouldn't have been able to avoid a metal cannonball smashing through the concrete otherwise, so the psychic hero used his quirk to divert the sai of one while avoiding the underswing of a katana from another. He briefly went airborne, a move he rarely performed due to mental strain. When a flash of silver passed by and the sai wielder was knocked off his feet by metal darts in a fierce gust of wind, he nearly cried out in relief. Smile Man then tackled the katana wielder and led him into the sub-level hallway that led to the cafeteria. When the hero drew his blow before Fat could absorb it, he growled and leapt between him and the cannibal, shouting, "Psyche! Get to Eri! Make sure she's defended. Move her to Midoriya's room if you have to," Fat Gum yelled. "We must protect the young Yayorozu siblings," Psyche yelled as he ran towards the stairwell, Takeshimi right behind him with the man with the claws. As Takeshimi raised himself and his man up with a platform of water, he used his quirk to lighten his body before jumping, making a few landings with each leap. Any help is appreciated. Cheshire observed from a store across the street from the hospital as the majority of the security detail focused on her advanced guard. There were a few additional men she wasn't informed about, but nothing that the League of Assassins couldn't manage. "You ready?" Cheshire looked at the assassin who had spoken. He was dressed similarly to the others, with the exception of the red-tinted goggles he wore, and he was holding the twin sword handles on his back, clearly prepared for his role in the operation. As the assassins vanished into the night, she grimly said, "Yes, take the rest of the team to the roof, we'll infiltrate from there." As she drew out her sai, her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to relax. "I will complete my mission," she swore, and leapt into the night.
So this was the end of the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.